It's America, for Christ's sake. This video triggered the fuck out of me, I gotta say, because this guy, Larry Sharpe, his recollection of history and how he was applying that to U.S. foreign policy was just devoid of facts. his recollection of history was just pretty awful, and Destiny doesn't know enough history to call him on it, so he got away with absolute murder. And I was watching the video and I was just getting so triggered that I wasn't sitting there being able to correct this guy. And then because of that, he actually did really well in the conversation. He came off looking really well because Destiny doesn't know enough history. I don't disagree with some of the stuff this guy says, like for his ideas on foreign policy and things he wants to do. Some of them aren't that bad, honestly. But the way he describes history is pretty shaky. And that, again, causes a lot of problems.
So I guess we go back to the original Korean War. So when North Korea wanted to invade and take over and establish an authoritarian regime throughout all of Korea, and we intervened to prevent that, do you think that that's something that we should have just allowed to have happened?
I would look at two different things. The causes of that first, and then I'll answer. So I want to hit two parts. First off, if we had been speaking to the Japanese and not done unconditional surrender, we could have avoided this. So it's our fault that there even had to be two Koreas. That shouldn't have happened. But we did it, and now there's two Koreas. So should we have stopped Kim Il-sung from uniting the Koreas? No, we shouldn't. No, I disagree completely. I think we should have allowed Kim Il-sung to mount his offensive, and if he had conquered Korea, then there'd be one Korea right now, and that Korea would have gone under Kim Il-sung. With Kim Il-sung as the dictator of North Korea starting in 1950, of all of Korea at that point, starting in 1950, well, now he has to retain his regime. He has to keep that regime going for the next, in this case, 70 years. Could he have done so? Maybe, maybe not. Would the Chinese be so aggressive with keeping him safe and giving him money and such? Maybe not. They're doing it now because we have troops in South Korea. So now North Korea has become a buffer state. If there is no North and South Korea, then there's no need for our troops.
Okay, let's
50 of all of Korea.
Larry Sharpe thinks that we should have just let the brutal dictator from North Korea take over South Korea and have all the South Koreans living in abject poverty and subjugation as the North Koreans are now. Yeah, well, he thinks the world would be a better place, or at least maybe the United States would be better off if we just let North Korea fight South Korea with the backing of China, because China was still helping North Korea. So he thinks that we should have just let that happen and let North Korea take over South Korea, and he thinks that, I guess, that'd be better off for the states, for the United States. I don't know if he doesn't think, I think it would be better off for the Koreans, but at least be better off for the United States. I don't see how, because then that means we have one less ally in the region that can like help push our interests and help push capitalism within South Korea. Yeah. And then he says something like China didn't help, or China gives money to North Korea. No, they don't. Not nearly in any way that they used to. Not in the last like 20 years. If you notice, China is going through, like, they're going to Africa, and they are investing in these African nations. Why are they not doing that in North Korea? They're not really doing that in North Korea.
Well, now he has to retain his regime. He has to keep that regime going for the next, in this case, 70 years. Could he have done so? Maybe, maybe not. Would the Chinese be so aggressive with keeping him safe and giving him money and such? Maybe not. They're doing it now because we have troops in South Korea. So now North Korea has become a buffer state. If there is no North and South Korea, then there's no need for our troops in South Korea. Then there's no need for a buffer state, in which case maybe China treats Korea like it treated Vietnam. Let it go. After Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and
they kind of have let North Korea go because North Korea has defaulted on so many debts, and the only thing China does is is back them with military, kind of. They don't really do anything in terms of economically for them anymore, and they haven't, because North Korea has defaulted on so many debts to them and other nations. And in the beginning, one of the biggest reasons that North Korea had any kind of economic power was Russia. It wasn't really China so much. Instead of putting large portions of this money towards other parts of their country and their economy, they put it towards their military time and time again. So like that could be one thing that may have changed. Also, the other thing that is that this guy just completely doesn't touch on is the Kim dynasty. They're awful authoritarian dictators. It's very hard to grow a good bustling economy from an authoritarian dictator. The Kim dynasty is part of the problem too, though. Like just who they are. It's also one of the reasons you can say that their economy has been so awful and hindered over the years.
We got out in 75. 20 years later, we were trading with Vietnam. You can buy furniture from Vietnam right now. The Vietnamese people are way better off than the North Koreans. That's for sure. So they would have had their own country in whatever way they felt appropriate. The Kim Il-sung regime may have survived, or maybe not. Who knows? There may have been some other type of regime that came into play. But let's say Kim Il-sung's regime survived. He would have had a full Korea to deal with. He probably would have started trading with Japan. Again, there's no South Korea, so there's no Cold War in Korea. If Kim Il-sung takes over Korea, the Koreans have their own peninsula. There's no Cold War in Korea, and he can grow his country as he sees fit. I think the argument that North Korea would have been North Korea now is not a solid argument.
They still kind of backed him militarily wise, and again, they may not if South Korea wasn't there, which is true. They may not do that. We don't know. But at the same time, we also don't know if the South Koreans who currently live would be living in abject poverty under subjugation like the North Koreans are. They may well be, and that's obviously terrible. I'm sure the South Koreans are happy that the U.S. intervened. I don't think that you would find a South Korean that isn't happy about that. Yeah. The Kims can run their country as they see fit. Well, yeah. The Kim is running his country as he sees fit now, and it's fucking awful.
We both acknowledge that baked into your ideal outcome, there are a multitude of assumptions, any of which we could go back and challenge. So, for instance, just because Korea is allowed to develop on its own doesn't mean that it wouldn't be an authoritarian regime. China could very easily continue to bolster whatever government exists there, as they do with Kim in North Korea. That buffer states can exist even if there isn't a South Korea, just because of regional interests in that Southeast Asian area. We can also agree.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Wait. Where else is there a buffer state in all of East Asia?
Where else is there a buffer state? Well, I mean, like in East Asia, I'm not sure, but arguably every single country that exists on the borders of NATO could be argued to be a buffer state, depending on how you're looking at it, right?
I'm talking.
He is just complete isolationist, pretty much. Like he wants, the only thing he wants is us to get involved, like with trade deals, economically. So I guess in that regards, he's not isolationist. But in terms of like any type of military involvement, he's completely isolationist.
Talking about China supporting Korea. China does not support Vietnam the way it supports Korea. China does North Korea. China does not support Mongolia that way. It does not support Laos that way. Does not support Myanmar that way. No countries that border China, none of them, which all in theory could be border states. Nepal, insert country here. None of them do they treat like they treat the Koreans.
Buffer state between China, Pakistan, and India.
Yes. That is the exception in all of Asia.
That is indeed the exception, for sure. But
yes.
Why would
I assume it wouldn't be like everything else?
Well, we're also looking at the conditions that exist in those countries as well. So, for instance, when you say like Korea, a unified Korea could be like Vietnam, nobody living in South Korea wants to live like the people in Vietnam. The explosion in growth, the asset to the entire world and to the United States and every other trading country that South Korea represents on the global stage, far.
Yeah, one thing you can't deny is that the South Koreans, of all the things that they're discussing, like for U.S. wise, and whether or not there should be involved is the South Koreans are damn sure happier that they are South Koreans as opposed to Vietnamese, or they live in Myanmar or any other of these countries that he's naming. And that is because it is like directly linked because of U.S. intervention that they have the quality of life they have.
Far surpasses that of Vietnam. My guess is going to be that any individual living in South Korea is probably happier living in South Korea than they would be under anything related to Vietnam as well.
Probably true.
So I look at somebody like South Korea that is an important U.S. ally, somebody that exists in the region that we rely on we don't rely on them, but that is like an incredibly valuable trading partner, somebody that we argue.
One of the things too that is so awful that this guy neither of them mention, right, is with North Korea. North Korea really should have a good economy, right? Like they should. They have natural resources that they can get out of the ground there. They have natural resources they can tap into on their own soil. They have the second largest economy. Is their neighbor. It's like it's on their doorstep. They can easily trade with the second largest economy. They don't need ships. You can drive across borders. It's right there. But they're still the worst economy probably in the world, if not one of. So that's one thing that neither of them mentioned in this thing is like, okay, it may have been better if we never got involved, but why is it not good now? They have no excuse not to be good now. Part of that reason could be just because of the Kim dynasty. They're fucking dreadful. So regardless whether or not we got involved in South Korea or we didn't, if we didn't, the Kim dynasty then controls the whole peninsula, and the economy is still shit because of other factors. And now there's less people in that area living a good quality of life, and there's more people living in abject poverty and subjugation.
Arguably prevented from being ruled by a single authoritarian regime, somebody that you could argue was important in our victory in the Cold War. I don't know if you would have preferred America to lose that, or how you would see that happening with the Soviet Union. It seems to me that when I look at a conflict like that, this is an example where the U.S. intervened, and what we have later is pretty positive. That South Koreans, that country exploded in terms of what it achieved, similar to like Taiwan or Hong Kong. It exploded economically, and the people there are happy and probably better off there for it. And the idea that in some hypothetical world, maybe if all these things would have been okay, it would have turned out okay. I don't know. I think I kind of prefer what we have right now to a hypothetical counterfactual that could have had a million other things going wrong.
You would prefer a god king in North Korea with starving population and nuclear weapons? That's better? I would disagree with that. The odds are,
yeah, because instead of North Korea, it would be a god king with nuclear weapons in just Korea. What is his argument against that? I don't know why Destiny didn't say that. So you would prefer a god king in North Korea with nuclear weapons? Yeah, because what you're describing, it could easily have just been a god king in Korea with nuclear weapons. There's no difference. If he would have taken over, if we wouldn't got intervened, there would have been no South Korea. He would have taken over the whole Korean peninsula, and the whole area would be his to be a god king of. So now he just has half the area. So yeah, that is better.
You're right. There's no way I would know what would happen. I'm only going with what happened through every other nation in Asia that also fought in World War II, that was also occupied.
Authoritarian are generally against free trade, so even if North Korea had achieved economic prosperity, it would have benefited until possibly 10 years. Free trade leads to free exchange. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why authoritarians and totalitarian regimes are awful. They don't do well economically because, like you said, that means it's the free exchange of ideas. It's the free movement of people too, and goods. They don't like those things. And authoritarian leaders and totalitarian regimes, they want a poor populace to rule over. When you're poor and you're hungry, you're not thinking about how you're going to create some revolution and overthrow the government and have a coup. You're worried about where you're going to get your next meal from. You're not getting the proper education you're not gaining the proper skills to learn how to better govern your own country. You're not meeting people that are also like you, because they're also hungry and looking for their next meal and struggling to get by. So you don't have the free time to socialize and create these movements, create these groups. You don't have the free time to dig into who would be a better leader for your country. These are all the things that you don't have time to do when you're struggling to make ends meet and you're struggling to fucking live. We see this all the time. Like, poor people even in poor people in democracies, they don't really vote that much. Voting and being politically engaged is something that happens when, somewhat a bit of economic prosperity, and you can grow, you can educate yourself, you can get a better job. This gives you a little more free time. Now you can have weekends off. You can have vacation. You don't work 10, 12-hour days. You have more free time to socialize and create groups and to learn better ideas and to be a smarter individual, so it's harder to brainwash you. This is one of the hallmarks of an authoritarian, totalitarian regime. They want to keep their people just barely scraping by, because that means that they're less likely to try to overthrow the government or try to demand some sort of better government. And that means that they're more likely to hold their positions of power. And it also means that the people that the authoritarian leader has to keep happy are a few people. When you're the more people when you're a leader that you have to keep happy or that you have to keep voting for you, the more difficult it becomes. You have to appeal to this voting block. You have to appeal to this voting block. You're juggling a lot of different personalities, a lot of different wants and desires, and that becomes more difficult the more people you have. So when you're an authoritarian, you want to keep that list small. You want to keep that list very small. And the more, if it's small, you have to juggle less people, less wants, less desires. You have to feed them less, do less, give them less money. It's easier to keep people in line. It's easier to keep people in control.
There's no reason to assume that it would go nuclear. Not just that, none of them are treated like North Korea. None of them are propped up that way. Why would I assume that? Not just that, none of them are our enemies. None of them are coming after us. We now have a North Korea that is our enemy. Why would I assume that?
So it's really hard to counter, because in your counterfactual, everything is going perfectly. But we could conceive of other scenarios.
No.
So, like, for instance, Japan is not happy with the way that North Korea functions in that region, right? They complain to us constantly. Yep. South Korea's not happy, right? It's entirely possible that maybe that North Korea, we talk about a buffer state. I don't know if you consider it possible, but maybe Japan becomes the new buffer state. Maybe Japan becomes an area where a lot of conflict starts to occur now, because Korea is something that China doesn't have to worry about anymore. Now, I don't know if that would be the case, but I mean, if you're going to posit very confidently that, well, a unified Korea is good and everything functions, well, then I can confidently assert, I'll say, oh, well, in that case, Japan would become the new battleground, right?
I did not say everything will be great. We fought a war in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying everything will be great. I'm just saying, if I look at all the other countries in that area, the only one that's had this problem is the one that we stayed and won the war in, or tied, I guess won the war, stopped the attack. In every other country, in Vietnam.
It's also the only one that has a fucking man-child, god-king, murderous dictator at the helm of it. Like, it's like you could just throw that like in there, like, okay, yeah, but it's also the only one that has this madman, just child of a lunatic leading the country. It could that be a factor? It seems like it could be. I don't know.
No,
this is
lost
true.
The war.
We did.
And the communists won.
They did.
The communists won that one.
But like, if we compare
every other part, it's better than North Korea. The biggest problem that we have in all of Asia, with the exception of China itself, is
I don't understand how Destiny isn't like, okay, but you admit North Korea is god awful. But if we didn't intervene and there was no South Korea, wouldn't there just be a god awful Korea then? Wouldn't just there'd be no good South Korea? It would just be a god awful Korea.
North Korea, and my argument is only one thing: it wouldn't be the North Korea of today. Only, not saying it's perfect, only by judging it every other Asian country. None of them are the enemy that North Korea is. None of them have nuclear weapons. None of them have threatened us. None of them are attacking Japan.
None of them have Kim Jong-un as their dictator either. I don't understand this argument. I'm not sure I'd call South Korea good, but I know what you're going to... Good in terms of, like, compared to North Korea, it's good. Compared to North Korea, I'd much rather be a citizen in South Korea than a citizen in North Korea.
None of them are buffer states. None of them have created anything else. So why would I assume that if we had just left North Korea alone and lost the war there like we lost in Vietnam, the same thing wouldn't have happened? In Vietnam, we lost that war, and 20 years later, we're trading partners. Why couldn't we have just lost the war in Korea
that is true.
and 20 years later be a trading partner?
That is true that 20 years later we are a trading partner, but Vietnam is an incredibly poor country with people that have a lot of economic difficulty that we are having trouble trading with because we apparently can't sign multiple.
Yeah, and again, you'd much rather be a citizen in South Korea than Vietnam. And North Korea, again, has China on its doorstep, and it doesn't even really trade with China. Its economy is in shambles because it doesn't have good trading partners, and it doesn't want to trade because it's an authoritarian regime. But you think it would trade with China because it's kind of like their ally, and they're literally right there on their doorstep. They can drive goods back and forth. But China doesn't even really invest in North Korea because North Korea has defaulted on its debts multiple times. China's going to Africa to invest. They're skipping right by North Korea, which is right there. North Korea also has nothing. Yeah, well they do have... They have access to natural resources that they can get from their own fucking soil, but they don't and they can't because they don't have quality. They don't have lots of good factories and good labor, specialized labor in order to do this. And part of that is because of Kim. He's a fucking madman. China probably buys North and South. I would almost bet they do.
Multilateral trade agreements anymore. The idea that like the existence of South Korea should be completely abandoned because I guess we're assuming that if it would have been a unified Korea, we wouldn't have any problems in that part of the world. I don't know.
You keep going to superlatives. I'm not going to superlatives. I'm not saying no problems. You keep saying we wouldn't have any problems. Everything's all perfect. I've never said that. Vietnam is not perfect. Cambodia is not perfect. I'm agreeing with you. These are not perfect. But
do you hypothetically let's say that
there's 20 hold on, there's 25 to 30 million people in North Korea right now. I would bet all of them, with the exception of the elites, would rather be in Vietnam right now. So your argument,
right, and they'd probably all would rather be in South Korea instead of Vietnam. They may would rather be in Vietnam instead of North Korea, but they'd all rather be in South Korea than either Vietnam or North Korea.
South Korea, I could easily make North
Appreciate
Korea.
the follow.
Thank
Thank you,
Koreans,
generic
50 million,
world.
give or take, South Koreans, about 25, 30 North Koreans. So million. So there's more South Koreans, I agree. But the people in North Korea, if they only got to Vietnam level, for the sake of argument, they only got to Vietnam level, they'd be happier. So the people who'd be sadder, people would be happier.
What if all of Japan was at Vietnam level? Because under your non-interventionist policy, we let China invade Vietnam, we let North Korea invade South Korea. All of those are now part of that big communist bloc. What if China says, well, now we're going to go and invade Japan afterwards? I imagine you would also have to take a similar non-interventionist policy. Do we just let Japan fall to China as well, and they become their own Vietnam too, or?
Well, are we done with Korea then?
Well, I mean, I'm just applying that similar type of argument, I guess, to Japan is in the region. So I mean.
No, I don't mind, but you said you wanted to do 4 specific things. If we're done Korea, I'll go here. No worries. Are we done Korea?
Yeah, I guess so. Sure. So in your hypothetically, like let's say Japan would get invaded by China, do you just let that happen?
Yeah. The reality of those issues is if China didn't invade South Korea, North Korea invaded South Korea.
China did invade Vietnam, though, but that's a different. But go ahead.
They actually didn't invade Vietnam. They supported Vietnam, but they didn't actually invade Vietnam. Last time China invaded Vietnam was like hundreds of years ago. I mean,
yeah, they did. No, they did. They invaded Vietnam after the Vietnam War. This is one of the parts that extremely triggered me, and Destiny doesn't know enough history. China fought a war with the Vietnamese just after the U.S. left Vietnam. It was like the late 70s. So I I mean, there's that little fact that was missed.
Hundreds of years ago.
Okay.
So China.
Hundreds of years. It was literally the late 70s. It was like shortly after the U.S. left. '79. China was a border war fought between China and Vietnam in early 1979. China launched an offensive in response to the Vietnamese actions against I have no idea how to say that word. What is this? Like, this is what... Oh, man, it just triggered the fuck out of me when I was watching this video. Destiny needs to brush up on his history if you're going to have... When you have conversations about foreign policy, you almost have to have a baseline understanding of history. Yeah, he's like... The last time they invaded them was hundreds of years ago. Actually, it was like, what, 40 years ago, bro. It was like... Literally, when did the Vietnam War end? 70... 76, something like that. $75. It was like 4 years later they invaded, but shit, I guess they didn't, according to this guy.
China didn't do any of the invading. In both cases, these were just countries trying to unite. Ho Chi Minh, I don't know if you know the background behind this.
They literally fought a border war.
Ho Chi Minh wasn't originally a communist. Ho Chi Minh wasn't originally a communist. He tried to get the Western powers to allow him to unite his country. When the French wouldn't do it, and they fought the war against him, and the French got their asses kicked and had to leave, the Americans, as the fools that we were, we got involved. All we had to do...
Right, but that's before China invaded the Vietnamese. This doesn't have anything to do with China invading Vietnam.
Was basically leave Vietnam alone. That's it. And Ho Chi Minh would have created his own Vietnam. Would it have been communist? Maybe. Would it have been capitalist? Maybe. But it doesn't matter. We have no right to decide what Vietnam should be, and we can't do it. We fail every goddamn time.
Other countries do, though. Isn't that the problem? So after we left, China invaded Vietnam, yeah?
After we left, yes, but not prior to Vietnam.
Sure, but so this is going to be like...
So now he agrees to it? Literally 30 seconds ago, he said China didn't invade Vietnam. And then Destiny says, after we left, China invaded Vietnam. Yes. Well, didn't you just say, like, a minute ago that China hasn't invaded Vietnam in over 100 years?
Like an overarching theme that I have, right? That you want to make the decision that we don't interfere in these other countries because we don't have the right to do that. But every other large country is going to. Right. So don't you just slowly cede influence to all of those? You're just okay with that? That just happens?
So let's assume that happens. Didn't China invade Vietnam after we left? China invaded, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So they had a war. I think they had border war, if I'm not mistaken. It was some kind of conflict. I forgot
this guy literally just said minutes ago that this didn't happen. Now he's saying it happened. Maybe he just misspoke or something.
Kind of conflict after we left. Okay, Vietnam still trades with us. So are you telling me you're prepared to send another 500,000 Americans over there so that we have a better trading relationship with Vietnam?
So Vietnam,
I don't know why.
So Vietnam trades with us now. People kind of have to trade with us because we're the United States of America, right? We won the Cold War.
I love that.
Let's say hypothetically, though, the United States loses the Cold War. Let's say the United States doesn't defend any allies. We don't have NATO. We don't do anything in the UN. And the world slowly is more and more Chinese and Russian dominated. Is that, I guess...
That's happening right now.
Sure. Well, China.
Literally happening right now.
Sure.
Yep, happening right now.
Do you think that that's a world that you would prefer to live in as an American going forward in the future, where it's like a Chinese or Russian-dominated world instead? Because then we might not have those trading partners, depending on, right? Maybe our sanctions on another country result in them sanctioning us, or maybe somebody else decides that, like, well, we're going to threaten, U.S. hegemony. We don't like how NATO works.
I don't understand these interventionists who want to be interventionists on everything. Don't these people understand that the reason America has the power it has is a few reasons. One is military, another is economy, and I'm not sure you have to have a strong. You have to have a strong economy before you get a very strong military, because you have to be able to support the military economically, and you have to have, quality, specialized, trained individuals to build a good military. but the reasons that we have such strong influence over other countries and hegemony in the world is because of these things. Part of it is because we've intervened in some of these instances. I don't like. Do they think that we would just be as powerful as we are, military and economically, if we just were completely isolationist all the time? That doesn't make any sense.
Now,
for sure.
Happening now, literally. As we have 29, is that right? Countries we're sanctioning now, something like that. It's happening right now.
Sure.
And now people are thinking, let's start having a different currency. Let's start going around American banking. UBS has more than once been caught laundering money for our drug cartels. I mean, this is already up there. Talking about cryptocurrency. There is so much of this already happening. So,
in your world, it would happen way faster and instantly, right? It would kind of be like me saying, like, we need to get fire extinguishers in this house because we have, we've got problems and it might burn down. And then you're saying, well, right now there's a fire in the bathroom, but the whole house could be burning down, right? So if we don't like the idea, and I agree that when it comes to tariffs, at least, they're garbage. We'll probably argue about sanctions a little bit later, but I do think that the United States, especially under Trump, has done a lot of really stupid tariffing and sanctioning, I guess. Although I'm not going to disagree probably with as many of those as you will. But I do agree that's a problem. But like in your world, this could all be hyper accelerated like a million times over, where China or Russia.
Why do you think that?
Because it was
about. Why do you think? In other words, let's assume for a moment, if China could invade all these countries. Why don't they? Because capturing territory in today's world is almost useless. They want to capture intellectual property and banking and companies and things of that sort.
I think that is.
It isn't useless. It's just it's looked down upon so much more. The weight of the world, the weight of all these other sovereign nations comes tumbling down upon you really quick, because we've progressed morally, honestly, and so if you're trying to stroll in and do what you're doing to Hong Kong, for instance, you catch so much more backlash and heat because of it. It doesn't mean that if they were to envelop Hong Kong into China, it doesn't mean that there's no like gain from that, from acquiring land, from actually acquiring like tangible goods. Of course there is. It's just that it's so much more looked down upon on the global stage, so people don't really do it as much. And in some regards too, it's become more difficult, and it also when it comes to like countries like that have nuclear weapons, it almost becomes like a complete non-starter.
Absolutely incorrect. I don't think that's true.
So why aren't more countries annexing more?
China is literally right now in the process of destroying an entire group of people in the Xinjiang region in order to acquire the resources that are in that part of the world. They're literally doing that right now. And we see north of India, west of China, east of Pakistan, we see there's a whole fight over the I forget the name of it, that region north of India where there's all that territorial dispute right now. Now, obviously, it's hard to do it.
Just another reason to capture land these days. Yeah. And the other one too is is China and the South China Sea. They're trying to expand their navy throughout the South China Sea and pick up these little islands and expand their fucking land. And they're trying to do it in Hong Kong, potentially Taiwan. Like I don't understand what this guy's talking about.
But China's involved in at least, and you.
China just signs deals with countries where Chinese companies get exclusive rights to material wealth. They don't need to invade. Yeah, that is one thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is more advantageous to steal intellectual property and to kind of go the route that China is going, more heavily. They seem to be going more heavily into the intellectual property, into the getting exclusive rights, like you said, investing in Africa and stuff like that. That is more advantageous in today's world. But it doesn't mean that it's still not advantageous to acquire land through invasions or through annexing or some other means. And they are still doing it. It just doesn't happen as often.
You've also got China that is kind of sort of actively fighting to get back Taiwan. That's kind of Kashmir, that's trying to get back Taiwan. That's trying to get Hong Kong. So it's not that they're not trying. This is really hard. You're kind of playing like the end game of Risk and everything's
Hold on, wait. You just said It's overnight, and I'm showing you. No, it's hard to take over land. It's
But
a
why
whole
is
lot
it hard?
easier to take intellectual property.
Why is it hard?
It's hard because people don't accept it. They fight back. We found out in
No.
Afghanistan, didn't we?
No.
We found out in Iraq,
If
didn't
China
we?
and North Korea wanted to, they would roll over South Korea in 2 seconds. The reason why they don't is because the United States is backing them. That's why. This would be a non-contest, and we've seen it around the world. We'll talk about the Gulf.
It's hard, yeah. It's because it's not, and like I said, it's not just the United States. It's the United States and all its allies, which is another reason why it does being completely isolationist and non-interventionist makes no sense, because that means the United States would not have these strong ties to allies with other strong militaries like Australia and Japan and the UK. So it does this. I don't understand this argument. It doesn't make any sense.
War, where Saddam rolled into Kuwait. We've seen Putin in Russia roll tanks into Georgia, take over Crimea, right? People will do it, but right now the worry is that the big bad guy, the U.S., is standing around the corner with a really big stick, and I think that probably helps to keep a lot of otherwise invaded people not invaded, right?
So, okay, so let me, if you're going to go on that road, let's walk down the road you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese, that we decide that we're going to leave South Korea, right? Tomorrow we pack up and leave South Korea, pull out totally. Do you think that North Korea would invade, or China would invade, or any of those would happen? I don't think that would happen. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you're right, and maybe China would take its tanks, roll through North Korea, grab North Koreans, and conquer South Korea. That might happen. Now, the option we have now, if we do that, is to do what we've been doing, keeping tens of thousands of troops in South Korea for decades, right? For decades, spending all that time, money, and energy, and keeping a Cold War in East Asia. But let's say instead I'm wrong, and they take over South Korea. Okay. What happens to us?
Well, what happens to us is every other country that's a part of NATO and every other country in the world that has any type of relationship with us is probably going to start looking to people like China or Russia for leadership or guidance, because the United States won't be trustworthy anymore.
So they're going to look to the country that conquers other countries?
Yeah, of course. That's why people look to the U.S. Yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
We don't conquer countries. We just get stuck in forever wars. We don't conquer.
This guy's perfectly okay with just letting China steamroll South Korea. Holy shit. This is isolationism just like taken to an extreme degree that makes no sense. So what if China just rolls through South Korea with tanks and takes them over? What happens to us? This is what Destiny said is true, is like your allies would look at you kind of differently. One, you kind of just left your allies to die, to be subjugated and rolled over by an invading army. That doesn't look good on the world stage. Two, you've also lost an ally in the region where you have your biggest adversary, which is China. So that's not good. Three, you've just, on the moral level, like you've just let millions of people get invaded and taken over against their will. Four, you're allowing your adversary, China, to gain more territory and to get more powerful.
Countries.
We don't
get stuck in forever wars.
It's not
we
that
don't annex nations.
We don't have a large military for no reason, right? We don't fight over a presence in the Southeast Asian region for no reason. We don't have bases all over the world for no reason. They exist for specific purposes, right? We don't recruit strange countries like Estonia into NATO just because we think they're a valuable military asset. We do it because the United States is backing those countries for a particular reason. Now, you ask me, like, if we pull out of South Korea, would they leave? I mean, like, it sounds like a silly hypothetical, or would they invade? Of course they won't invade. Well, like, we say, of course they won't, but I think that's because we take for granted the fact that, of course, they won't, because the United States is there. Like, China has been testing so much recently, whether it's with their cruisers in the ocean in that region, whether it's them, like, trying to get more and more influence in Hong Kong, whether it's them butting heads with the British over Taiwan. The idea that if the United States were to just completely say, South Korea, good luck, you're on your own, like, bye, that there wouldn't be some move made by, the South China Sea, that there wouldn't be some move made by China or North Korea to be more aggressive towards South Korea. I don't think that's unfathomable. I think that could very much be the case.
Or maybe we can have better relations with China. Maybe we could trade more. Maybe we could open up ourselves. What you're saying now is, well, South Korea is fine. So now
we can trade more with China. We already trade a ton with China. How much more can we trade? Like, how much more can we trade that's gonna change our relationship with them? I don't understand that argument. We already trade a ton with China. It is like, how much more is it would all of a sudden our relationship with China would change?
now we get to punish North Koreans for 70 years and for 70 more years, or how long it takes, because we want South Korea to be fine. I'm not okay punishing North Koreans. I'm not okay doing any of that. I want people to live their life with their own countries.
We're not punishing North Koreans. Kim is punishing North Koreans. Okay? That's a funny thing to throw at the feet of Americans.
The way they want to live their own life with their own countries.
So it's not, we're not choosing to punish North Korea. North Korea is making those decisions on their own. The way that they
Exactly.
treat their people is there are plenty of countries that have had odds with the United States that hasn't led the same type of authoritarian regime that North Korea has. They're the ones that are choosing to test, working their way towards ICBMs. They're the ones that are pursuing a nuclear program.
Yep.
That is, so
Yes.
it's not, we can't just blame, like, oh, well, it's the U.S. is the fault for North Korean leadership.
Hold on. I would say we can, and let me tell you why. We are punishing Iran. What are they doing? Looking for nuclear weapons. We've been punishing North Korea. What are they doing? Looking for nuclear weapons. Ask the clerk in South Africa. Why South Africa nuclear weapons? Because of our sanctions.
They've been punishing their way before that they were trying to get nuclear weapons. And after the Korean War, when things had settled down and they were still more friendly with Russia and China stopped giving them money and they stopped investing in North Korea. And North Korea was more worried about subjugating its people because he's an authoritarian dictator and he wants to keep a poor population so that he can keep his fucking job.
He will tell you that. Yeah, because when we do that, they get scared. They act desperately. And they do shit like get nuclear weapons or biological weapons. The more we punish them, the more they act desperately. If you want to make people not get nuclear weapons and not do desperate things, don't put them in a position of desperation. And they tend to not do that.
I disagree. I think that countries want nuclear weapons because it legitimizes their authority as a country. Like when you have nuclear weapons as a country, it becomes very hard for people to invade you. You gain some level of respect on the world stage. Arguably, it's why Pakistan and India is where it's at. But like the problem that I'm taking is that like it's almost like a prisoner's dilemma sort of thing. If we lived in a world where Larry Sharpe was the president of the United States and the head of the CCP.
Hopefully one day.
Okay, hopefully one day.
Hopefully.
And everybody was like, you know what?
Like most libertarians don't understand geopolitics. It's like I just don't understand like their take on things. They have such like an idealized pie in the sky type of scenario drawn out in their head, and they think that would actually be what happens. And it also seems like everything to them falls back on like, oh, we just have to trade with people and people will be happy. As if like there aren't competing ideologies in the world. There are some people who just think the world should be ran differently than you. They think their country should be ran differently than you. Some people just want to watch the world burn, regardless of how much you fucking trade with them. Yeah, the most extreme libertarians are like basically anarchists where there's like no government. And then you have the normal libertarians where, you know, they think government should exist really to just, I guess, trade and like protect people's rights. Yeah, the building regulations ones, that's always a good one. That's the argument that Dave Rubin made on Joe Rogan. And even Joe Rogan was like, you realize this is stupid, right? Don't get me wrong, there are quite a few American interventions that were god-awful. That were just god-awful. But it doesn't mean that we should be completely non-interventionist isolationists. It just means we should pick our interventions better. But yeah, I would say the last like 20 to 25 years, 30 years or so, a lot of the military interventions have been terrible. Yeah, I think a lot of our interventions in the Middle East, especially in recent history, have been pretty god-awful. Iraq, Afghanistan, we're not intervening in Yemen, but the fact that we supply Saudi Arabia with some weapons and particular fuel. One of the biggest things that the U.S. gives Saudi Arabia to help them carry out their destruction of Yemen is fuel. The U.S. is refueling a lot of their planes and their vehicles, and obviously weapons as well, but fuel is one of the biggest ones, and that's no good. I mean, it's just what's going on with Saudi Arabia and Yemen is terrible, and in a way, you can link the U.S. to that. I would say that Iraq, Afghanistan have all been pretty disastrous. Base Pittelli said, yeah, I don't think there's such thing as a proper way to withdraw with no negative consequences in the short term. We just have to set a deadline and stick to it, withdrawing as carefully as possible within the allotted time. Yeah, it's you're probably right. Like it's one of those things that in the short term, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid kind of. Like it hurts, and then eventually the pain subsides. But in the short term, it probably will cause some more turmoil and hurt certain people in those regions. Because there are people in those regions, and there are certain like small groups, militia groups, or just like the Kurds come to mind, who definitely will suffer in the short term if we pull out.
Your view, you're saying Chinese are winning. They are, and they do it, but I don't just want to sell weapons. We could also sell things like, I don't know, music and cars and computers and all types of cool things. Because you know the best way of getting people to not fight wars? By making people happier.
But one thing about the Kurds is, from the very beginning of our intervening in the Middle East, they've always been there. Like they've always been allies to American troops. They've fought side by side with American troops. They really went hard after ISIS and stuff. So like, it just seems like such a betrayal. We are absolutely terrible at trying to like nation build. That's for sure. It's such a long game, right? It's not something you can do in 5 years, 10 years. It may take 20, 25, 30 years, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and money and capital, and to actually like try, because you have to change minds. You have to change minds. You have to change people's minds on how they think they should be governed, on how the things that they value, their morals. You have to change people's minds, and this takes a long time. One of the main ways that Middle Eastern culture, Middle Eastern countries kind of see the world is through like an honor system. It's through like an honor culture. And one of the things in the West, the way the West kind of sees human interaction and human Western culture is through contracts. Is through binding contracts, and these binding contracts allow you to build business, build prosperity, get into agreements with each other. One of the things in the Middle East, in that part of the world, a lot of it goes off the honor system. It goes off of how honorable you are. And it's a lot of honor culture type of values and ideologies, and those are basically the opposite of contractual culture, where we don't go off the honor system. I don't have to like honor and think that this person is high of upstanding. They come from a good family. They're not gonna fuck me over. Or you have to have like you have to go into a contract. And you're legally bound by whatever is laid out in that contract. And then we go to the courts. That's not how the Middle East has been or is currently for decades and decades. It's a different way of valuing human interaction.
Sir.
This guy, it seems like to me too, like he just completely ignores like competing ideologies. Again, like where there are different types of people. Like, for instance, we just talked about like the people, you have like more of a contract-backed policies and laws and society, and then you have more of one that's like built on like an honor system. These are completely different ways of viewing the world. And then you obviously have competing religions, competing ideologies. Just because you trade with someone doesn't mean that they change the way that they think the world should be ran. Libertarians have like, sometimes they have like a pie in the sky type of understanding.
Or whatever, or does a movie opening or whatever's the cool thing, or they open up Netflix over there or whatever's the cool thing, they're not going to want to do that. Now, again, they still might go to war, but the odds clearly go down. So I just want to bring that piece up. Even if they're fighting, so what? The odds are they're not going to fight, but they're fighting now. There's a civil war now still in Syria. Iraq's still a disaster. Our intervention has done nothing but make things worse.
I mean, it depends on who we're talking about, like on behalf of who, right? So like, would any intervention in the Middle East on behalf of people being, destroyed by like ISIS, would they say that our intervention made things worse for ISIS, or?
Yes, and I'm happy to cover that too. Number one, who does it not make it worse for? The elites who are still in charge. They're loving it. They get to recruit people. They get to have people to be their suicide bombers. The elites are loving it. So they win every time we do that. ISIS. When ISIS actually began to control territory, people said, oh my God, we can't have ISIS controlling territory. There'll be a caliphate in the Middle East. There is one already. It's called Saudi Arabia. They're literally a caliphate. There's already one in the Middle East. So who cares? But next, oh my God, they don't have to control territory. They'll be horrible and they'll come after us and get us. No. You know what happened when ISIS actually controlled territory? They began to collapse because they can't govern. They began to collapse.
Wait, but why do you think? Why do you think they started to collapse though?
You could just look at it. They couldn't govern.
Why not,
they were
though?
ideologues.
No,
because they were ideologues.
It was because they were being pressured on literally every end. You had the Iraqi military that was pressuring them with the support of U.S. troops. You had pressure from the north in Turkey. You had like 14 or 15 odd different types of rebel groups in Syria that were fighting against them. You had Assad that was fighting to recapture those oil fields in the northeast. You had support coming over at special forces from China. You had jets flying in from Russia to bomb them in Syria. It was not just because they couldn't govern. You had the Kurdish people. You had the YPG, the PKK, the Peshmerga. Oh, sorry. There was a lot of different pressure that brought ISIS down. It wasn't just because they couldn't govern.
I'm wrong. So why do we have to be involved? I'm wrong. So why should we be there? All these other people were doing all this stuff.
Because if we're starting to have problems showing up across the world because of a particular country, it seems like it's probably necessary for some sort of intervention to happen there, right? If we get ISIS that is staging terrorist attacks out of their territory in places across Europe or the United States.
No, they're not.
Well, they were in
ISIS
Europe.
Wasn't doing that. No, they weren't.
The France shooting, none of that.
Inspired. Those are ISIS inspired. They weren't staging shit. That was people who watched their videos on YouTube and got radicalized on YouTube and did stuff. They weren't reaching out to ISIS fighters.
Wait, so doesn't that disprove his point? Doesn't that disprove your point that sometimes ideology, you can trade with people all you want. You can open up trade and you can reduce sanctions, but sometimes there are competing ideologies that just butt heads. And there are people who they're literal jihadists who think that if they die for the cause, if they die in jihad, they will be given all they need in the afterlife and they will be martyred. Like they literally believe that. So you can trade with these people, that's not going to change their mind of these things. It's a very idealistic way of looking at things. Like, oh, if we just open up trade, people will be happy and they'll stop doing what they're doing. That in some cases that may happen, but there may also be tons of other cases where it doesn't happen. And that is proof where there were ISIS-inspired attacks or in other nations. So doesn't that mean that there are people are driven by more than just, economic prosperity or not? There were literal Americans who live in the best economy in the world who left everything they had and went to the Middle East and joined terrorist groups.
They're all ISIS fighters.
Even if we say that is the case, first of all, I'm pretty sure that things in the U.S., I believe, so like Miami shooting, I think was like ISIS-inspired or whatever. But I'm pretty sure there was
inspired.
Yes, but there was direct coordination with stuff like the shooting in, like the big shooting in France in the theater or whatever. That wasn't just inspired people. Like these people were getting like support from other people. They had big weapons. They were coordinated. They had training.
Couldn't you also say too that it could be worse if we weren't there, if ISIS wasn't being destroyed? There's another counterfactual that you don't know, right? You're saying that, it would be fine, but couldn't it also be worse if we weren't actually putting pressure and fighting ISIS? Couldn't their expansion and their ability to reach people be better? It's a counterfactual that is in opposition to your counterfactual, but it does make sense. Improving economic situations in these countries via trade would make their ideologies less appealing. There will always be people on the fringe, though. Yeah, they'll always, I think economic situations can improve people's outlook on their everyday life, and they'll be maybe less apt to commit violence, or it's not going to work for everybody, and it's not going to even there will be large pockets of people who still have competing ideologies that are just in direct opposition to their neighbors or other countries around the world, and regardless of their economic situations will still seek to do some pretty nefarious things.
But let's say hypothetically that we even granted all of that. If you still have this particular spot in the world that is supporting in whatever way and encouraging and radicalizing people to do these acts, is that not something that should be looked into?
Yeah, but why are they doing it, right? Why aren't those acts? Why didn't ISIS or Al Qaeda, as an example, why didn't they mount offensives or inspire people in Norway or in other places? Why? Because
they did. They inspired people. They inspired Americans. There were Americans that literally left the states, their cushy home, and went to join terrorist groups. Appreciate the follow, Revolt Rise. Thank you. I think it could, trade definitely can help as kind of reduce tensions. If you open up trade and people prosper. At the same time, sanctions are also a necessary tool, right, too, because if trade is what you want, and if trade is what you want to open up and to have people in these countries prosper, and it'll reduce conflicts in the world, well, then sanctions also have to be used, right? Because if trade is what you want, and I can then sanction you or embargo you, well, then it's a tool to stop you from getting what you want, so it can bring you to the table to then open up trade. So, because before he was saying like, oh, we should just open up everything, don't do sanctions, don't do embargoes. Okay, but there are reasons to do those in sanctions and embargoes, because if trade is what you want, that is something you use in order to get them to the table to give them what they want.
It's the enemy.
Or is it because we're like the symbol of like the leader of the free world? No offense, but nobody gives a fuck what happens in Norway. I mean, nobody cares if Norway gets...
No, I agree. I agree with you.
But it's not because Norway isn't doing anything or because they aren't the United States. It's because I don't know what Norway represents.
No, Norway represents old Vikings, I guess.
Sure.
But my point is, they don't hate us because we're the free world. They hate us because we bombed them. They hate us because we've been invading them. ISIS got power because we knocked down Iraq. That's why
that is partly true. That is part of the argument, but the other part of the argument is the ideology. The other part of the argument is the jihadism. It is part of the argument. It's not solely because we've bombed them. That's not the sole reason. It's part of the reason, but it's not the only reason. And looking at it through that lens is not going to give you the full picture.
ISIS became powerful. We created ISIS. That's not true.
I think people have a hard time actually believing people who believe and say they believe really insane ideas, like martyrdom and jihadism and people who actually fucking believe these ideas. Sane people have a hard time actually believing that what they're saying they really believe. They think that they're just like crazy, or they don't actually believe that. Like, no, they may not actually be crazy. They may be like in the real clinical sense of the word. They may be completely, perfectly normal in the head. But some people have some really strange beliefs. They just do. Not every, like, it's the whole thing when people say like, oh, so and so is grifting. Like, oh, they're a grifter. Some people are. Some people really fucking believe the crazy stuff they say. The ideologies. I just don't like. It's the same thing with communism and capitalism. Like it's an ideological difference that causes people to see how the world should be ran differently, and that caused conflict throughout the Cold War. Because people saw they had competing ideologies. It wasn't necessarily because so and so was poor and so wasn't poor. It's the same thing with. This goes through the path of time. You can go through like the Crusades. You have competing religious ideologies. Some people believe the crazy shit they say they believe, and you just take them at face value. But again, I don't think we can. People downplay the religious and the ideological bent on this too much. People just think that these people don't actually believe this stuff. Like Hamas doesn't really want to kill all Jews simply because they're Jews. Yeah, they do, bro. You take them at their face value. That's what they say. This is what they say. Are we just going to say that they're lying to us? Like, there are competing ideologies in the world, and some people believe the insane shit they say they do. Like, for instance, you can just bring it to America with the white supremacists. With the white supremacists here in America, who actually believe a lot of the insane shit they say they do, and they want America to be a white ethno state. We take them at their face value. We believe them when they say their insane things. They actually believe that shit. It's a competing world ideology. Material conditions can make it can exacerbate the problem for sure, but it's not the sole problem. People actually, like, people's minds are at play. Ideas become your actions, and people can have some really terrible ideas and act them out in the world.
If we had just stayed out of World War I, the odds are, we don't know this for sure, but it looked like the Central Powers would have won. probably Germany and Austria would have won World War I. If they win World War I, well, there's no World War II the way we saw it. Right? There may have been some other World War II, but
Man, that's such a hard counterfactual. If the U.S. got involved in World War I at like the very fucking end, and would Germany have won if the U.S. didn't get involved? No one fucking knows. I mean, you don't. We don't know. That's such a hard counterfactual to try to iron out, and anything you say after that is kind of just, we're all just playing games, because that's such a hard counterfactual to iron out.
But it wouldn't have been when we saw it. The odds of them going through that, there's probably no rise of Hitler, right?
Maybe
it is a Cold War.
It is like, it's I can't even imagine what the world, because now we're
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
at the point of World War II, because if we go back infinitely, the U.S. never exists because France doesn't intervene and help us in the Revolutionary War, and now everything is gone.
Yeah,
so
it's just that's kind of a silly. I mean, we can play that counterfactual game if you just want to have fun and talk about it, but man, if you're going to use that to try to bolster your argument as for not intervening in things, because if we didn't intervene in World War I, there would have been no World War II. Man, that is a leap that a world-class Olympic jumper couldn't land.
Back to no intervention ever. So the point of World War II is happening, where we clearly see that there is one power that is starting to take over the entire freaking world. We as long as Japan never attacks us, we don't intervene. We just let it happen.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, we lost 500,000 Americans. And
so now this guy is just saying that, well, say out of World War II, fuck it. This is what I mean, like with libertarians who were just completely non-interventionists. Like, well, if Japan never bombed us, we don't get involved, and we should have stayed out. Just never get involved. Just let Nazi Germany do what they're going to do. Potentially they're marching troops through the streets of London. Fuck it. Who cares? What? This is just. Oh man, this is isolationism taken to its absolute terrible end.
And started a Cold War and supported the Soviet Union because of our intervention in World War II. That's what happened. And to be clear, most people don't know this. I've asked this question in the show before. It's a trick question. When did the United States declare?
If Japan never attacked us, yeah, we might not get involved, for sure, yeah. Being skeptical of intervention is great. The U.S. had a bad track record, but interventionism is just a tool. It isn't good or bad on its own. Yeah, you have to evaluate each intervention, for sure. Yeah. So just like saying, like, oh, we never should intervene. World War II, fuck it. We should have just stayed out. Even, like, let's say Japan never bombs us, we just stay out. That's for the better.
War in Germany. We didn't.
That wasn't part of declaring the war on Japan, wasn't it? Like considered the entirety of the.
Not at all. If Germany didn't declare war on us, we wouldn't have gone to war against Germany. Germany declared war on us. December, was it 10th or?
Because they were allies of Japan. What the fuck? What the fuck? Like, of course. Yeah, of course they declared war on us because they're Japan's allies. They signed a treaty, the Triumvirate, it's called, I think, between Italy, Japan, and Germany. Were they not going to just... Japan was attacked. You don't think Japan saw an opportunity to take more land in the South in the Pacific? They could have the Philippines, the Dutch controlled land, the French Indochina. They saw opportunity because France and the Dutch and the English are all busy fighting a war in Germany. I mean, in Europe against the Germans. So they saw an opportunity to expand their empire when they were already went into China. They already went into Manchuria. So like, yeah. And then when they bomb Pearl Harbor and their ally is Germany, of course Germany is then going to declare war on America because we declared war on Japan. Speaking of fairness, yeah, when I watched this video, I got triggered as fuck. If you're talking about me, he broke me. This guy broke me because the way he describes history in the beginning with the Korean and when he gets into the World War here, it's just it's terrible. It's just like a terrible recollection of history. Yeah, they did, yeah. But we did that because they invaded China. We did that because they were invading China. They invaded Manchuria. They had the something, I forget the name of that city. It starts with an N. It's a name of a city. It's a massacre where they went in and like killed everyone and like raped the women. It was just absolute horrific. I forget the name of the city. It starts with an N. And they were. Then we stopped trading. We stopped selling them oil. We stopped selling them oil. We put some embargoes on them because of those scenarios. And then they entered into that treaty with Nazi Germany and Italy. And then they tried to work out a deal with Washington. Tokyo and Washington tried to work out a deal, and it never worked. And then they bombed us. Japan knew that the U.S. was going to enter the war. They needed to quickly take the entire Pacific to prevent the U.S. advantage. The Pearl Harbor attack was supposed to cripple the U.S. Navy informants. Unfortunately, the attack was... Yeah. Well, I don't know if they knew that we were going to enter the war. Maybe they suspected. I don't know if we would have, honestly. A lot of people believe that we never would have entered the war and if they didn't bomb us. But that was their plan. Their plan, was to completely cripple the U.S. Navy so that they can continue taking the land that I just mentioned that's controlled by the French, the Dutch, the English, because they couldn't defend their shit because they're fighting a war in Europe. So they saw it as an opportunity to expand their Pacific empire, and their only problem would have been the States. So they wanted to cripple the U.S. Navy to tackle Pearl Harbor. It just so happened that like 3 of our largest cruisers weren't actually docked at Pearl Harbor when they attacked. They got some pretty faulty information, I guess. Shame on whoever was giving them intel back. And it never actually crippled our Navy. Russia had Germany and Japan pretty much on lock. It probably would have taken longer, more soldiers' lives, or in result, though without a bisect Germany and Japan would probably look different today. I don't think Russia beat Germany partly because of the U.S. intervening on the side of the Allies. Russia they were beating Germany on the Eastern Front, but if Germany wasn't fighting such a strenuous war on the Western Front, once the U.S. got involved, it would have been much different for Russia. We let them invade China for 10 years. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we didn't let it go on, but it wasn't like we just slapped an embargo and sanctions on them for no reason. What gets me, most of the World War and the Prime Minister and Ambassador of Japan was about to speak with our people about a peace treaty and not getting involved with the war. Like literally had its... Well, Japan, like I said, Tokyo and DC, they were discussing potentially like figuring out some sort of reducing sanctions, ending the embargo. They were trying to work towards some sort of agreement, and it never materialized. We wouldn't have entered the European war, almost for sure. Yeah. If they wouldn't have bombed us, we probably never... I mean, I don't see anything that tells me that we would have... And because there was quite some time that Churchill was trying to get... was trying to get us in the war. He was trying to get Roosevelt to come to the war for quite some time before Pearl Harbor, and it just wasn't working out. They also didn't attack the oil fields at Pearl Harbor. They were too focused. Yeah, they didn't. I don't know if they missed the... Yeah, that's another good point. I don't know if they... you got to think that their plan was to attack the oil fields, right? It'd be pretty fucking silly not to attack the oil that we had there. Maybe they just fucked up, missed, or didn't get it done by some stroke of luck or something. Russia won World War II, in my opinion, or at least had the most They had the most casualties, yeah. But I think people downplay. I mean, the U.S. getting involved. We had the greatest military leader on the Allied side was Eisenhower, bar none. He was the greatest military leader on the Allied side, and there was a reason he was the leader of the Allied forces on the Western Front. I mean, Normandy probably goes completely different. The Battle of the Bulge probably goes completely different. If Nazi Germany isn't fighting these wars and the U.S. isn't involved, his attack on the Soviets is very, very different. The Soviets were definitely the most impacted. They lost the most people for sure. Ranking victims by body count is a pretty shallow view, and maybe even there's so many factors that go into ranking victors, I would think.
8th, I forgot when it was. Hitler declared war on us.
Sure, but Japan, where they were allies, right? So we know they declared war on Japan. That's going to be.
They weren't. No,
yes,
because
they were.
Russia was fighting Germany. Russia was not fighting Japan.
Doesn't matter. They were allies already. They already entered the tripartite. I don't know how to with the word. They were already allies. Japan and Germany and Italy were already allies.
No, that's not how it worked.
Yes, it was how it worked. They signed it in 1940, I believe.
Germany declared war on China. China wasn't fighting Germany. Japan declared war on America.
The assumption
Germany
is
wasn't
that
fighting us.
Okay, so you're assuming that if Pearl Harbor bombs us and we go to war with, if not Pearl Harbor, if Japan bombs Pearl Harbor and we go to war with Japan, that Germany would just chill and do nothing, and that we would just chill and do nothing. We would just stop with Japan, or what?
No, what probably would have happened, and again, this is all hypothetical, so I realize what I'm saying is maybes, ifs, ands. Actually, there was...
Well, what you're saying is maybe ifs, ands, but it's not even predicated on accurate depictions of history. Tripartite was late 1940, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, let's get the date, actually. Because what this guy said is just... September 27th, 1940. It was a fucking... So, no. But this is what triggered the fuck out of me when I saw this video and I watched it, is Destiny doesn't know enough history. And this guy got away with he got away with absolute murder. He just like butchered history. And then he starts building counterfactuals on faulty historical facts. And you're like, well, if we're going to play the counterfactual game, you have to use real historical facts.
It was a book written, believe it or not, by Newt Gingrich. He wrote a book called 1945.
Newt Gingrich, what
and
a piece of
shit.
shit.
The book he wrote was in his fictitious book, Hitler actually goes into a coma. He has a car accident, I think, and he goes into a coma in December. So he's in a coma when Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. So he never declares war on Russia. And in his book, we defeat Japan, Germany defeats Russia, the British sue for peace, and it's a Cold War between us, the Brits, and Germany.
Okay, but Germany literally declared war on the United States after we declared war on Japan. So I don't. So how?
Correct.
Because they were allies. So what he's just saying, correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah, because they were allies already. You just said like 2 minutes ago that they weren't. So when they bomb us, we obviously then declare war on Japan. And then when we declare war on Japan, their ally, Germany, declares war on us. It's just like a normal causal chain of events, my guy. I don't understand what's so hard to understand. Destiny doesn't know enough history. I think the Sharpe was the egregious, to be honest, but I only half watched. Yeah, I oh my god, I watched it and it triggered the fuck out of me because I'm not like, a historian, but I know some history, and I was watching this stuff and I was like, whoa, man, Destiny, you're letting him get away with murder, and it's because Destiny doesn't know history. But he openly admits he doesn't know history. He's using Trump tactics to tell so many lies that people don't have enough time. Yeah. That's the thing. I don't know if he's lying or he's just mistaken. I don't know him. You know what I mean? You kind of have to know someone's behavioral patterns to say that they're lying or if they're just mistaken and they're wrong. So I don't know. I've never seen him before in a discussion, so I don't know if he's lying or he's just mistaken.
We're acting like, we're going to do something. We weren't planning to do anything. We sent Jews back to Europe when they came to us.
That's
sent
true.
them back. We weren't trying to do anything. We weren't
I mean, regardless of intent, wrong is wrong. Yeah, it is very true. I think, he's definitely just wrong. I just don't know if he's like doing it maliciously, if he's lying, which does make a difference. We're all wrong from time to time. We're all mistaken. The shitty part is like I said, Destiny doesn't know this stuff, so he wasn't able to call him out on it and correct him. And the other crazy thing is, like he just said, he's like, when Destiny lays out that Germany declared war on us because they were allies of Japan, and he says, yes, well, a minute ago, you were saying no.
Trying to the largest, I don't know if people notice, the largest group of ethnic group people in America is Germans. That's the largest ethnic group in America. And there was a thing called the Bund. The Bund was actually German Americans during the 1940s who supported Germany. We weren't going to war against Germany unless Hitler declares war on us. So this idea of us intervening and saving the world from fascism.
But he had to declare war on us because he was goddamn allies with Japan. Like, what don't you understand? When Japan attacks us and then we declare war on Japan, he then has to declare war on the States.
It came to us. We weren't planning on doing anything.
I understand
So I
that
don't think
originally we
that-
wanted to be non-interventionist, but we
Correct.
intervene, and I feel like most people would agree that the U.S. intervention was probably a positive thing. But it seems like you're saying that the U.S. probably shouldn't have intervened. If Japan hadn't attacked us, we let Germany run all of Europe, and then Japan and Russia and all of them are
Well,
friends.
again,
and then...
I'm saying the same thing. The reason why Japan attacked us is because of our economic sanctions against them. Our economic sanctions against them is why they bombed us. That's the reason why they bombed us.
Right, but why did we put those economic sanctions on them? We didn't just do it for no fucking reason.
We didn't have economic sanctions against Japan.
Are we-
They
is
don't
there-
bomb Pearl Harbor.
Is there sure? But is there? And I'm pretty
That's
sure it's
what
because of,
countries
in
do
large part,
desperate
because of
things.
our support of the Soviet Union as well, because of all the materials that
No,
we're
our
sending.
support of China. It was our support of China.
Okay.
We supported China against Japan, and so we put embargoes against them, trade embargoes. But
It wasn't just supporting China. It was what Japan was doing to China. They invaded them, and they were massacring the Chinese. So as another nation that is not going to let that happen, but we're not going to go to war and bomb Japan, we did the next best thing. We put embargoes and sanctions on them. What would you like us to do? To just let them waltz in and murder the Chinese? And then not put sanctions and embargoes? What is the point of sanctions and embargoes then? What is the point of it? The point of it is to try to avoid war so that you can put embargoes and sanctions on people so you can avoid actually killing people, and then you can bring them to the table and you can hash out an agreement through diplomacy and avoid the war. But they couldn't hash out agreement through diplomacy. I don't. This is triggering the fuck out of me. It wasn't that kind of dry, to be honest. Hitler made the decision to declare war without consulting with his top. Well, yeah, I mean, but Hitler was a fucking madman especially when it comes to military. He was constantly at odds with his top generals, even in the midst of like actual battles and wars, especially when they were fighting the Soviets.
But not only trade embargoes, immigration embargoes, immigration holds,
Sure.
all types of things against them because of their war in China, because we were supporting China for some
Sure.
reason. I guess
Do you
that's-
think that there's ever a world that ends with World War II, with Japan, the Soviet Union, and Germany winning and taking over, that ends up being more positive for the United States afterwards? Do you think that world ends up better for us and most people?
No way. There's no way. Yeah, I have some of the same disagreements that I've had with Destiny, but I respect you more because you don't Mount Bailey like he does, and your takes are more consistent. Well, I appreciate that, Mel. Thank you. Yeah, I try not to. The old Mott and Bailey can really get under people's skin. I think of like the type of like argument, like argument tactics or fallacies that really get under people's skin. I think that's one. Another one is like when a red herring. For me, anyway, those are two that like get under my skin because it seems so disingenuous when people do it.
That's a very good question.
Well, but that's what you're
I
asserting
think-
throughout this entire conversation, is that it would be a better world.
Yes. So let me walk down that road. Now, I think it'll be a better world and a more just world in general, because again, I respect.
This is insane. So he has to bite the bullet on saying that he thinks the world would be a better world if Nazi Germany won and Japan won. He thinks the world would have been a better world. This is insane. He has to bite this bullet because of the path that he's walked down already.
The Soviet Union and Germany winning and taking over, that ends up being more positive for the United States afterwards. Do you think that world ends up better for us and most people?
That's a very good question.
Well, but that's what you're
I
asserting
think-
throughout this entire conversation, is that it would be a better world.
Yes. So let me walk down that road. Now, I think it'll be a better world and a more just.
He thinks it'd be a better world and a more just world. Holy Christ. Well, answer me this. If Nazi Germany wins, what stops Nazi Germany from just like marching right into Israel and just massacring everyone? Because they were real close anyway. What stops them from continually rounding up Jews throughout Europe? What happens to France? What happens to France, for Christ's sake? Because he already took over France. Maybe they work out some agreement, and the British And the British is still a sovereign nation. They work out some sort of agreement, and British is still British. But France is gone. Poland's gone. Belgium's gone. These are all Nazi Germany now. Like if Germany had the amount of soldiers that the Soviets had, they would have ran roughshod all over Russia and Europe. It would have been over. I don't even think there's much that we could have done. One of the saving graces that they didn't have as much land, and they didn't have as many actual bodies. That was one of the problems when they were trying to fight so many wars on so many battles on so many fronts. But if they had more, let's just say in a hypothetical world, Germany was bigger and they had more actual bodies to suit up and go to war, oh man, it would have been very, very different.
World in general, because again, I respect the rights of people to run their own world and run their own governments. So that too, right? There's a philosophical piece on top of it.
He respects the rights of people to run their own government and run their own society. So then he completely just respects what Hitler was doing. It's his own society. It's his own people. And we've already went over. He completely respects what Kim Jong-un is doing in North Korea. This is an absolutely just abhorrent take. Like, this is why I'm also a moral realist, because the stances he's taking here is a stance that you'd have to take if you're a moral anti-realist. You think everyone is correct in their own fucking moral system, and yeah, that's what they do there. Who are we to say that they're fucking wrong? We shouldn't do anything about it. This is just on its face abhorrent. It's insane.
But let's say the Japanese, we don't do anything bad at all to the Japanese part of World War II. We don't have trade embargoes. We don't have any of these. We don't have immigration bans, which we had all of those things.
But we had those things because they attacked China. Let's say they don't attack China, and then we don't do those things. Okay. You have to go one step back further. We didn't just do those things for no reason.
Against the Japanese specifically, and Chinese to a certain extent. We don't do any of that stuff. We just let trade go back and forth. Then there's no need for them to bomb us. Japan has no natural resources. That's why they wanted to become an industrial power. So they wanted initially, if you look at your history, people can check out if they want to, initially they were trying to trade for those things. But we told them no. And because we wanted to support the Dutch, who had colonies there, the French, who had colonies there.
We told them no because they were just pillaging their way through China. What the fuck? Oh my God. Destiny never says this either.
All of East Asia, except for Japan, was colonized. I think Thailand also wasn't colonized, I think. But Japan was about the only country not colonized. So they were saying, hey, Dutch East Indies, French Indochina, British Burma, American Philippines, will you please trade with us so we can grow and be a powerful country? And we said, no, you're Japanese, go to hell. And they said, great. We will then.
No, we didn't say that they were Japanese, go to hell. We didn't just say, oh, because you're Japanese, go to hell. No. Because we were trading with them. They got 80% of their oil from us. What is this guy talking about? Why is... Jesus Christ. We were just like, oh, you're Japanese. We don't want to trade with you. Fuck you. We were already trading with them. They got large portions of their oil from the States. And then we stopped when they started massacring Chinese for no fucking reason. Jesus Christ. And Destiny just doesn't say anything because he doesn't know.
Greater East Asian co-prosperity sphere, if my memory serves correct. And that was them invading all of our colonies and saying they're ours now. They basically said Asia for Asians, like we said America for Americans. And if they had done that and they just traded, they wouldn't have created that. They created that because we wouldn't let them trade.
What do we do?
All they would have done is invade Korea.
So what do we do when that unified body then comes to U.S. shores to destroy us? Because at that point, we've completely and totally and utterly lost. There's no hope for us.
Let's assume, and here's why I disagree. If we had just traded with them, they wouldn't have invaded the Philippines. They wouldn't have invaded the Dutch East Indies.
Why?
But they invaded China when we were trading with them. They invaded Manchuria when we were trading with them.
Why do you have this assumption? How do you know that so when it comes to people like Mussolini or the Emperor of Japan or Hitler or Stalin, these were not people that were driven by libertarian economic ideology. Like that's not what
Correct.
these people were after. Or when you look at people like Mao, these people are not looking for, I just want to trade and be friends with everybody, right? That's not their ideology.
Correct.
The idea that
I agree.
simply because we won't attack them, well, they would never attack us. It's a beneficial relationship. You know what else is beneficial? It's them conquering us, stealing and taking everything from us as well. They feel like they have the means to do so. So I don't understand how you can have this world that exists hypothetically where 90% of Europe is now ran by Germany or split down the middle between Germany and the Soviet.
So this guy's take essentially is that Japan bombed us and it's our fault. That's his take. That is his take. Is Japan bombed us and it's our fault because we put embargoes on them. That is his take 100%. And one is it's silly, and two, it completely misses the point of why we put those embargoes on them. You know all that money we were giving you for oil over the past 5 to 10 years? Well, fuck you, because we're Japanese, said no politician during that time. Yeah. Listen, Sharpe, I always appreciate my anti-Western, but yeah, this take is a joke. It's, oh my God. Triggered.
Soviet Union, where Japan is allowed to expand its empire across the entirety of Southeast Asia because that's what the Japanese wanted to do. And now that they've gotten all their expansion out of the way, and everybody turns their eyes to the new world, and they're like, "Oh, America, yeah, they're chill. I think we're content now." Right? This sounds like appeasement on steroids. Why do we think that they wouldn't come after us at that point?
I'm happy to explain all of that. Absolutely. Japan wanted to trade. The only thing they wanted to invade was Korea, and they've been invading Korea for 1,000 years. They somehow believe that Korea is theirs in some way. They've been invading Korea for 1,000 years. So they would have kept Korea as a colony. They would have done that. And they would have correct Manchuria, which they changed the name to Manchukuo, if I'm not mistaken. They created Manchukuo, which is Northern Chinese. That's all they would have kept. Why? We know that. They only went further when they had to get more resources. When you give them the resources via trade, the Japanese did not invade. That's how I know. They didn't. But not just that. They didn't have the military to do so. When Yamamoto made the plan for Pearl Harbor.
They didn't have the military to do so. Yes, they did. But they saw the states as a problem in the area because we were the only ones not fighting a war in continental Europe. But they wanted to take over the British colonies that they had there, the French, the Dutch. But the U.S. is right on the side there with Hawaii, and they saw that as potentially a problem with us being there. We're not actually fighting a war in continental Europe. But the other countries are. So we can take this stuff, but the U.S. is still right there. And then we obviously put an embargo on them because of what they did in China. And then they got upset because of that. We tried to work out a negotiation again. We tried to negotiate with them. It didn't work out. And then they bombed us.
He told the high command in Japan.
What he's basically saying is give them what they need. So you're basically saying it's like a hostage situation. Just give them whatever they're asking for, because if you don't, we're going to bomb you. That's essentially his argument. Give them what they're asking for, trade with them, give them what they want, because if you don't, we're going to bomb you. Okay, well then just take that to its logical conclusion, continued throughout time. It's like they always said, like, you never pay a ransom. You don't pay a ransom because they'll do it to you again. Now they have the notion that you're going to fucking pay. Okay, well, they'll do it to you again. They'll hold something over your head. They'll threaten your sovereignty. They'll threaten your life. They'll threaten something, and then they'll get what they want. This is essentially what he's saying. Give them what they want. Trade with them. Give them their oil. Or, then you got bombed. Of course. You didn't give them what they wanted.
He said, guys, I give you 6 months. Then we're finished. There was never any plan to invade America. It was impossible. They didn't have the power, the bodies, nothing. They were recruiting people and sex slaves and workers from Korea to work in Japan because they didn't have the bodies to literally hold on to all the islands they had. No, Japan could have never conquered all of Southeast Asia. Never held it. Never conquered China.
People would have said, wait, why do you
America.
think that, though? Wait, why do you think that, though?
They couldn't do it now.
People probably would have said the same about Germany. Germany post World War I. I don't even know if they were, but they did. Germany in World War II conquered almost the entirety of Europe. And that's with the United States playing only one side and exclusively trading with one side of that conflict.
Yes. But let's say the Germans had done that. The Germans had conquered Russia or whatever.
Not Russia. We'll say they conquered the majority of Europe and they have their alliance with Russia that they tried to do.
Okay, let's say let's go to your point. They smash Russia and they make Russia like behind the Ural Mountains or whatever they do, and they make the massive großen Deutschland. They make the whole big thing they want, and Berlin's the center of the world. Okay. So now they're going to trade with nobody? Now they're not going to. What?
Well,
The empires
arguably,
just keep
these
growing.
people, they don't care about trading. They're fascists. They don't work the same way that you and I do. What they want is they want racial purity. They want an ultra-nationalist state. They want one party. They want to regiment the state in such a way that it optimizes the survival of their nation and their people. They don't care about trading. They run off of a different type of fuel.
100%. Now, as you do that, and you can see it already happening in Germany. In Germany, people don't know this. In Germany, they tried to kill Hitler 44 times. Germans didn't want Hitler. They tried to kill him 44 times. Could you imagine if he had controlled all of Europe? Eventually, even that empire falls. That empire can't. Fascist empires, they only last when it's an internal struggle.
It was very much so, at least principally, ethically right to have gotten involved in fighting Germany and Japan. Maybe we can question the way in which we did. The bombings were probably highly necessary, but that's not the argument Sharpe is making. He's saying we shouldn't have gotten involved on principle, which is insane. Yeah, he's basically saying we should have stayed out because he's isolationist, like, to the core. And then he's blaming Japan bombing Pearl Harbor on Americans. He's blaming it on the fact that we put embargoes on them and completely not telling anyone, or doesn't know to tell anyone, about why we put those embargoes on them.
Please show me one example of fascists surviving outside of their own country.
Fascists didn't survive because America showed up and intervened. So they got destroyed. So of course they didn't survive because they were taking the opposite end of the conflict of the United States. Had the United States not intervened, maybe Germany turns out to be an incredibly successful autarky. Autarky, I think I pronounced that correctly. Where they are completely self-sufficient. Where they don't have all the drama and all the... A what?
Autocracy.
Not, there's a word for it. I think it's...
It's autarky. It's like a self-sufficient nation. It's like an economic term where a company is self-sufficient, or a country is self-sufficient, and they don't really need free trade, open trade. They supply everything for themselves.
Autarky. It's the concept of a self-sufficient nation. Like, you don't need to trade with anybody.
I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So like maybe they do achieve that. Maybe they don't have that conflict. Maybe the people there are genuinely happy. They execute whatever minorities or whatever groups of people they want, and then they live in harmony. It's possible. You know, you can point to the fact that so many people tried to assassinate Hitler and blah blah blah. And that makes, I mean, we've had a U.S. president assassinated. We've had multiple assassination attempts across multiple U.S. presidents. So I mean, it happens even in the United States. I don't know. It just seems like a fantastic world where we assume that. Again, given Larry Sharpe as the president of every single country, open trade, open borders, open all of that stuff is what I'm in favor of, and let people economically sort themselves out. But I don't think everybody has the same engine running under the hood sometimes when it comes to what their goals and desires are. And I think that you have to contend with other countries that might have goals and desires that are incompatible with maximal globalist economic freedom. Because there are people that are driven by things that aren't that.
I actually agree with you on some of those points. I do. But the issue is, if I'm going to be in a world, in my view, I think I have two choices. One, where I am basically a non-interventionalist, and maybe I step in the next time an actual Hitler pops up. Maybe I do. Okay, I would buy that. We are nowhere near that. We are involved in everything. We're bombing 7 or 8 countries probably as I speak. There's no actual Hitler out right now, and we're involved in everything. There is no actual chance right now. There is no chance of any nation conquering the world at this point. That's not even conquering a continent. That's not going to happen now. If that ever were to happen again, fine. You know what? I'll step away and we'll do it. I'm okay with that. But that is so rare. That's maybe once in a century. Maybe once in a century.
Okay, so now he's changed his mind. Because initially he was saying we shouldn't have gotten involved and the world would be better off if we didn't get involved in World War II. And now he's saying, okay, if a Hitler pops up, we should get involved.
I can still, if I'm this magical president you're talking about and I become president, I can still do what I think is the most important thing, is use the bully pulpit with a moral war. I'm okay with that.
But there is no moral war if there's nothing backing it. It's was it Roosevelt or who said it's like walk softly but carry big.
Eventually, every kind of law or regulation that you put down is backed by some sort of threat of physical force. And if there's no threat of physical force behind it, then it'll just get broken every time.
Stick or whatever. There is no bully pulpit. Yeah, there's no bully pulpit if everyone knows you're not going to do anything.
But there is, because we are a globalized society and money talks. So if instead I simply tell my people in America and across the world, look, these guys are doing these bad things. Why don't we all say that? We should look how bad they're doing these bad things.
So wait,
and what begins to happen? Let me finish. What happens?
Okay. Well, careful, because it sounds like you're about to justify sanctions or embargoes.
Yeah.
I am, but I'm not. Be very clear.
Okay.
I am, but I'm not.
I'm
okay with individuals deciding to purchase what they want to purchase when they purchase it. And if that means that by default it creates a sanction or an embargo, I'm okay with it. Why? Because then that is turned by morality, not by American interest. That is turned.
It was turned by morality in World War II. They were massacring Chinese, the Japanese, so we put embargoes on. Now he's arguing, he's like, the goalposts are on both sides of the field with this guy. He's arguing both sides of this argument. He's saying that we should just open up a trade and we shouldn't embargo or sanction anyone and everyone would be happier, but we should then use sanctions and embargoes to make sure people don't act out and do the things that they do. Well, that's what we do sanction and embargo people for. And then you just said that that's what caused Japan to bomb us. So it's technically our fault. I can't keep up with like where he's moving the goalposts to. It's just like they're all over the field. For sure. That is definitely him. It's like, what? You're arguing both sides of this argument.
Turned by the individual people who can actually forgive somebody or change. We decide Cuba is bad. Why? Because Cuba's bad, so we will do that for 70 years. But if the American people actually believe that the Cuban government is evil and horrible and we should not buy these specific things because this is how the Cuban government treats its workers, we don't have to buy it. But now if there is a Cuban guy or gal who makes a company, who does it the right way, we can purchase from that person. We can decide, yeah, most of these Cubans are bad guys, but this one Cuban is awesome. Let's buy his shoes or his cars or his whatever.
But I don't think people in markets don't make moral choices like this. People just buy whatever's cheapest. I don't think
that's true at all.
Absolutely
I'll give you an example in New York State. I'll give you a specific example.
That is true. How could you say that's not true? People don't make, especially people who don't have the funds to make moral choices about where they're buying X good from. They just fucking buy it. Especially, like I said, if you don't have the funds to go shopping or to get the best ethical product. People don't make decisions like that. People go to Walmart every goddamn day and buy whatever the fuck they want, even though Walmart is using absolutely basically slave child labor over in Japan or in China.
Example in New York State, craft beers. Craft beers in New York State, and this is prior to COVID. I don't know what's happening now. But
because
prior to COVID, people go into a bar.
Sure, these aren't moral choices. Craft beers are a hobby. Given the opportunity to buy, craft beer is a hobby. It is not a necessity for life.
Yes,
if I need to buy something
absolutely.
like food or clothes or gas for my car, you're not going to have an average American drive to the gas station and buy. They tried that after 9/11. I don't know if you remember seeing the tariff-free oil gas stations and shit that popped up. Nobody's going to pay more for those types of things because working class people don't have the luxury to make moral choices when it comes to what they buy or don't buy. So you're not going to have people that are going to be supporting, and most people don't even know the conflicts that are going on in these countries. 95% of Americans couldn't find Yemen on a map. So the idea that they would be making choices at a store for what they want to buy based on those things, I don't think that's going to happen ever. You're never going to have any form of bully pulpit because you're never going to have any form of sanctioning or embargoing.
Two pieces I'll bring up. I agree with everything you just said. Number one, because no one tells them. Because we don't have enough people explaining exactly how bad we are for bombing people. And maybe a president should do that.
Wait, you just changed the for how bad we are for bombing people. No, it has nothing to do with what you just said. He's talking about the ethical consumption of these goods and where they come from. And then you say no one tells them who we bomb. That has nothing to do with what we're saying. We're talking about the ethical goods of where some of these things come from and what goes on morally. And then you say nobody tells them about who we're bombing or why we're bombing them. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. No one tells them about where these goods from, and even if someone told them, they wouldn't care. No, most people aren't politically engaged.
What's actually happening and stop telling people because they have the bully pulpit and they don't. They spend time doing other stupid stuff. They should do that instead, number one. But number two, let's say you're right. And let's say the vast majority of Americans, I'm wrong, you're right, they don't care. I want the cheapest goods. I don't care about Yemen or I don't care about China.
They don't care.
Then what right does the government have to sanction if the American people don't care? If the American people actually don't care, like, we don't care if it's slave labor, we don't care. Let the slaves make it.
I think
if the American people actually believe that, then why would the government, how does the government have a right to
the government has the right to do it because the government gets its power from the people. And if the government is the one that's enacting sanctions or tariffs and they're being voted on it, right? I imagine we elect leaders because we trust them to make these decisions. And
yeah, because you're electing leaders to be in a position to make decisions that you can't. They are better informed. They're supposed to be better apt to do this job. They know things that you don't. They understand global relationships, geopolitics. You don't care to understand them. So you elect them to do the job for you. So there are going to be some decisions that they make that you have you don't care to know, couldn't figure out on your own, even if you wanted to. That is the point.
Our elected officials are elected by us because we entrust them to make these decisions. That's exactly how it works.
They're elected by us because of gerrymandering. That's how
they're elected by absolutely not.
Gerrymandering.
You can slice up the country any way you want. There's a lot of Democrats. There's a lot of Republicans. The government functions exactly as it intends to, exactly as it means to, exactly as it would, no matter how else you slice it up. Absolutely.
Gerrymandering is a problem, but that doesn't have anything to do with what you just said. It doesn't have anything to do with what you just said. When you're poor or you're scraping by, you have less choices. You have less options. Mm-hmm.
No parties in the Constitution. Parties are a thing they made up. Parties are not part of the Constitution at all. Our first president said, don't have parties. It will just destroy us. Gerrymandering is a thing they just made up. Nope. These are selected. I've run for office, my friend. I know how this works. They are selected. And then because we decided with a two-party system, the other guy is evil. Whoever the good guys are, whoever they select, is who goes off.
Sure, we can talk. Sure, wait. We can talk about two-party systems or where they come from as much as you want. The reality is that our government, we could have 50 million parties in there if we wanted to. We could have 50 million parties in there if we wanted to, and guess what? Every single one of them would have voted for us to invade Iraq after 9/11, no matter what, because that's just how the American population was at the time. There wasn't going to be a counterbalancing force there. So we can have a million parties if we want in office right now, but the reality is Americans are never going to feel a certain way, regardless of. I think you said it's because they don't tell them it enough. The government talks to people about foreign policy all the time. Anytime something comes up, the reality is that people don't care about it. Nobody really truly cares about what happens in the Middle East. Nobody truly cares about what happens in these places. But we vote for leaders because we hope that they would enact some form of leadership that we would see as somewhat moral. So, for instance, if it came out,
yeah, most people don't care. You see that on polling, right? When they do the polling for like which issues of the day is why you voted, particularly when there's like a presidential election. Foreign policy is like never even on the list. Okay, it's like never even there. And what do you see when most people are talking about this stuff, even on the internet, like to us who aren't normies, people who were like, knee deep in this stuff. You even rarely see foreign policy discussed on these things. Most of the people are talking about like social issues. Most people don't get involved with foreign policy and the ethics or morals behind it.
Iran an ally, we would have more power over them to make them not buy nuclear weapons. Yeah. Yes.
You can't just make Iran an ally when you have other allies in there that are their neighbors. That's not. It's like it's just such like an idealized situation. Well, yeah, let's make Iran an ally, but wait, Saudi Arabia is already your ally, and they're like neighbors. Your allies with Israel, and they're right there. How is Saudi Arabia and Israel going to react to that? You have to manage people's like relationships. You can't just do things and expect, and then nothing is going to happen that is a negative after you do that. There are going to be, if you make a decision and then you make Iran an ally, well, how does that affect your relationship with Saudi Arabia? How does that affect your relationship with Israel? What happens now? There are some groups of people that have competing ideologies, and you can't be allies with them. Because you don't view the world the same way. It's like Destiny said before, it's like not everyone is like a libertarian free trade dude who just wants to open up trade and trade with everyone. Like not everyone sees the world that way.
Disagree. I don't think if we drop the sanctions on Iran, they're not just going to become an American ally. I don't think it works that simply.
It doesn't.
It takes about 10 years. That's what happened in
Vietnam. It could take longer than that.
10 years to become an ally or neutral, 10 more years to start trading. It happened.
It could take longer than that. Just because it happened in Vietnam doesn't mean that's what would happen there. You have no idea. It may not happen. They may first get into some sort of conflict with one of your allies in the region, one of your ex-allies. Then what do you do? We're allies with Iran now. Like Israel is going to be like Israel's just cool with that? Of course not. So that's going to cause cascade effects. Who knows what's going to happen after that? Foreign policy is hard as shit. There's a reason most people, even politically branded influencers, don't talk about it. Yeah, that's very true. That probably goes back to what I was saying before as to why like so many people, even like people like us who like love this stuff, you don't see a lot of this like people getting knee deep into foreign policy and geopolitics. It just doesn't happen. Like you go on Twitter, you go on YouTube, and most of the stuff is about like social issues. This type of stuff is, I think one of the reasons too is because you kind of have to understand a little bit of history. And most people don't like history. They think history is like fucking boring. And I think if you don't have like a baseline understanding of history, you end up what happens here, where Destiny doesn't know history and he's letting Sharpe get away with murder.
That's probably through a series of embargoes, through a series of sanctions, through non-trade, through all of the economic power and might and alliances that we had in the West and in the First World.
I'll tell you what it was. The black market. The black market got them to see ours. Why do North Korean people defect? Because South Korea is literally doing like parachutes and sending stuff over there to the black market so they can see what capitalism is like.
But wait, earlier in the debate, you said we'd be better off if there was no North and South Korea and it was just all Korea controlled by the Kim dynasty. That's what you just said. But now you're saying that South Koreans are sending goods to North Koreans through the black market and showing them what life is like on the other side because it's much better. But earlier in the discussion, you were saying that the world would be better off, the U.S. would be better off if we just let the Kim dynasty control all of the Korean peninsula. That this is just... What?
That's why they defect. How else would they know? That's what happened in East Germany. That's what happened in Poland. It was the black market that went across there and people saw it. Sanctions create a black market, which means violence, which means poor people, which means someone who doesn't have enough money to buy food because they want those cool American blue jeans in the 70s or whenever it was. They literally don't go out to eat because...
The thing is that the Sino-Vietnam War basically removed Vietnamese government that the U.S. was at war with, so that ironically allowed us to trade with them. That's a good point.
They want to buy those damn jeans so bad. That's what wins. So let's end the embargo, give them the damn jeans, and they'll become our friends. Give them the Pepsi and the Coke, and they'll become our friends. Again, we've seen it happen before. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but every country that we've spent time embargoing and hurting, every one of them, none of them have been better off. None of them have become more democratic, but everyone...
Well, Japan. Japan's one, right? We embargoed them, we sanctioned them, we went to war with them, and they pretty much adopted, our economic system, our free trade, and now they're way better off.
One that we've just left alone and traded with has become more democratic. Vietnam is not a great country right now, but is it better than it was 30 years ago? Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's better.
So, okay, so in terms of a country that I think we tried to embargo for a bit and then it escalated into actual conflict, for the Bosnian War, is this stuff that we should never intervene in as well? So when there's giant massacres going on, you've got Serbian friends trying to invade and massacre people to the south, is that just something you leave alone as well, or?
Yeah, the Yugoslavian Balkan disaster is a tough one. It's another tough one.
Destiny, when he tells you that he'd leave alone World War II and he would just let Hitler just march all through Europe and potentially have Nazi stormtroopers marching through the street of London, when he tells you that he's cool with letting that happen, he's cool with letting anything happen.
I wish that was an easy answer. That was a powder keg waiting to explode since the Turks were in there. So that was a tough one. It's hard for me to give an answer, but I would have to give the answer, which would still be in what I feel is right, which is you have to let people have their own civil wars. When we don't let people have civil wars, things get worse. In America,
I would agree with that. Civil wars, you should let. I would agree with that. I would agree with that take. I'm not sure you should get involved in civil wars.
America, we had our Civil War. We had a Revolutionary War. We had to have it to make a country. A lot of these areas that have been colonized, and the Balkans were colonized first by the Austrians and then by the Ottomans, and the Middle East was colonized by the British and the French, and kind of by us now. If we don't let them become nations on their own, if we don't let them go through whatever civil war they want to go through, we don't solve anything. One of the reasons why we have so many problems in the Middle East.
The crisis that he wasn't talking about wasn't just civil war. Yeah, sure, that's a good point. That's a good point. But like I said, when the guy, like 20 minutes ago, he was perfectly cool with, just letting Hitler march his troops all the way through Europe, all the way through into London, and he's cool with letting that happen, and there's no more France, there's no more Belgium, there's no more Poland, it's all Nazi Germany. He's cool with that. That's how the war ends.
Is we haven't allowed them to create their own civil war and to create their own nations as they want to. We decided what the nations were, and we stopped the wars before they can end.
What about places what about places that are allowed to have their wars that we don't intervene in?
Yes.
So if we look at like Darfur in Somalia, or if we look at like the Rwandan genocide. So these are so the Darfur stuff's ongoing. So in Rwanda, it was some 500 to 800,000 people killed. Are these good
over
things?
a million?
I'm going by conservative estimates, but sure. Some would say that in excess of 1 million people. Tutsi or Tutsi, I don't know how to pronounce it in Rwanda. Tutsi. So,
Tutsi.
And the Hutu.
Is the idea here that like our non-intervention was like a positive thing in these areas, that they are allowed to figure this out for themselves, that at some point some master race or people that have decided they're superior get to reign supreme, or?
And again, you're providing very good examples that are very tough. I would ask you, if the Hutu and the Tutsi believed, and they did, that the right answer was that the other side was inhuman and that it was completely okay to literally hack people up with machetes because you are a Hutu or a Tutsi. And that's what they believed and did. If we had come in and stopped that war, how do you heal that wound? You don't. It just stays. And then 10 years later, it ignites again. And 5 years later, it ignites again. As horrible as that was, and by the way, that was all because of Belgian interventions in the first place. The Belgians created the Tutsi and the Hutu. They did not exist. They are fabricated tribes.
Goddamn Belgians. Goddamn Belgians. Fucking Belgians and their waffles.
Fight the Belgians. So our intervention in the first place, again, is what created this. But now that it's here, they had to get through this. And for the Rwandans, as bad as it's been, they've had apology courts. They've gone through all types of things. They are repairing a horrible wound. If we had gotten involved and stopped the fighting, they would still be fighting. Or 10 years later, if you think the other is literally vermin, and you are okay with chopping them up because Americans show up with bombs, it's not going to stop you from thinking that.
Isn't that literally what happened? Isn't that literally what happened with World War II?
Yeah, we fought a war to stop the Nazis. You know what we still have? Nazis.
But
lots of Nazis, lots of them. In Germany, in America, all over the place.
We don't have a Nazi country though. And I think that the people, and I think that there's a big difference between pockets of Nazis scattered throughout the world versus a Nazi empire that is dominating the majority of Europe. Right?
Agree.
Huge difference. This is also a testament of why it's so difficult to stamp out an ideology. It's an idea. You're trying to destroy an idea. That's an extremely difficult thing to do.
It seems like we just have two. We have this fundamental incompatibility where you think that the world will tend towards peace and prosperity if left to its own devices, and that everybody just is this rational economic or more peaceful and more prosperous than we are now. Yes, that it'll be more prosperous and more peaceful than it is now if the U.S. just steps back from everything, lets everybody else try to sort everything the way that they want to or whatever. And I don't.
And I'll give you the once in a century.
I mean, for the most part, the world is more peaceful and more prosperous now than it is in the past. I mean, it just is. I know Destiny is a history buff, but he's got to do research stream or two sometime. In fact, he doesn't know history very well. Like you said, it's letting Sharpe get away with murder. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. That's why I watched this video, and I was like, oh, I have to watch this on stream because it triggered the fuck out of me. Generally, when when you're watching something like this, if someone is on the other side, like someone is saying things that are factually incorrect, and then someone is correcting them, you get less triggered. You're like, okay, yeah, that's good. That's what I was thinking, or that's what should have been said. But when they're just letting them go for whatever reason, it just triggers the fuck out of you. It's like Dave Rubin sometimes too. When Dave Rubin will do his interviews and he'll interview someone, and the person is just spouting so much nonsense, and he just lets them fucking say everything. And he's like, that's my tactic, I kind of just let them, give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves, But they're saying some of the most egregious things, and he's just like, yep. And then he'll start kind of agreeing with them.
We fight the Hitler. I'll buy that. I'll give that. We'll fight the Hitler once in a century. But every other war that we've been in this century, last century, I'm sorry, I wish we weren't in. I'll give you the Hitler one. Fine.
If we look at,
the Hitler.
Let's say,
okay, he bit the bullet on the Hitler one. He's given us the Hitler one. You're saved, Brooksy. You're saved. America will come to the aid of our allies in Europe. This guy's okay with it. How do you guys continually strive to improve yourself? I think there's a few ways you can really improve yourself as a person. Intellectually, monetarily, physically, and spiritually. I think those are the 4 ways you can improve yourself. And you can probably find other ways, but I think they would probably fall under one of those 4. But I think those are 4 ways you can improve yourself. So physically, intellectually, monetarily, and spiritually. And then there are a number of things you can do that will help you improve those under those things. So intellectually, you have, if you have the internet, you have the world's knowledge at your fingertips, man. You just got to know where to look. So you can learn just about anything for free, honestly. You don't have to pay for courses. You can, but there are entire universities actually that have open libraries on their site, and you can read straight from certain high prestigious universities as well. Plus, you have YouTube, you have Google Scholar, you can learn trades if you want to learn how to do like, something that actually is of your hands, like an electrician or plumbing or something like that. Then spiritually would be whatever that is for you. While I am a staunch anti-theist and I'm fervently against like organized religion, if spiritually, if that's what gets you going, if that floats your boat, that's how you can improve yourself spiritually. For me, I meditate. I do meditation. I do mindful meditation, and that kind of gets me right mentally. Physically, obviously, would be your diet and exercising, and then monetarily would be, again, investments, working, anything that you can accumulate some capital, whatever you're doing. So those would be the 4 ways that I think that everybody could improve themselves, and then there's a myriad of different things you can do under each of those to make those things better. That's my take. It's why I don't watch Joe Rogan. I think Rogan has had good takes in the past, but might be worth saving. But the man just brings anyone on and rarely challenges bullshit when people try to peddle it on his own show. Yeah, Rogan. I think what Rogan knows, like, you'll see him when he does know, he'll push back, and then he gets into areas where he doesn't know and he can't push back. So you see this, like, where he pushed back with Shapiro when Shapiro was talking about systemic racism, and Joe Rogan pushed back. Steven Crowder brought on. He was talking about like marijuana. He was talking about like marijuana statistics, and Joe Rogan pushed back. When Dave Rubin was talking about regulations and how, he was taking the libertarian perspective that we don't need regulations, fuck building codes and stuff like that. And Joe Rogan pushed back. But yeah, I think there are instances when he doesn't, but I think he doesn't because he's just not equipped to. He doesn't have the knowledge, which is understandable sometimes. When you're talking to that many people, like Joe Rogan talks to everyone from all walks of life, you're going to have people on that and discuss topics that you know nothing about. Motivation is one of those things that, being motivated is one of those things that is tricky. You got to find something that you're extremely passionate about. So as a teenager, what I would suggest is trying as many things as possible. One of the things that you have when you're young, and even me, because I'm not that old, is you have the luxury of time on your side. So try as many things as possible. Try a lot of different areas, topics, intellectual pursuits, physical pursuits. Try these things out for a short period of time, 6 months to a year maybe, and see if you enjoy them. See what you're passionate about. Because when you find something that you truly are passionate about, the motivation just comes naturally. You'll want to do it. So you can use the opposite of motivation, like laziness. You can actually use that as a tool to show you what you don't like. A lot of times people will be like, "Oh, he's the so-and-so is lazy." Well, are they lazy because what you're trying to get them to do that they don't care for? They don't like it. They don't want to do it. So you're saying that they're lazy because they're not passionate about what you're asking them to do. So you can actually use laziness as a tool to show you, yeah, this isn't something I'm really into. And to find out something you're really into, you just have to try a lot of things. So, like that can be anything. That could be streaming. That can be a certain type of job. That can be certain classes in school. It can be certain topics of intellectual pursuits. It could be working out. It could be a number of things, but just try a lot of things in your youth and figure out what you really enjoy. When you're doing anything in life, like any kind of activity or something that you're maybe trying to monetize, part of it is luck. Part of it is luck. It's just the way it is. You could be really good at something, and luck never comes your way, and it never ever ends up materializing into something. This is like one of the gripes I have with libertarians, where the guys walking around the streets holding their Atlas Shrugged book, and they think that they're self-made. I got news for you, bud. much of your life, pretty much all of your life, is complete fucking roll of the dice, and you're not self-made. And you never know where the stuff's going to lead you unless you do it. You know, you're never going to really know how this is going to materialize into something better for you in the future until you fucking do it. So like you just have to do it. You just have to take the step, jump off the cliff there and actually get to work. A lot of times people end up thinking too much. You know, they end up spending too much time in the thinking phase, spending too much time in the preparation phase, and they don't actually just do. Sometimes it's better just to do. And a lot of times the luck, you know, when you, whatever you're doing, if you want to monetize and you want to get good at it, you know, people say like if you're really good at something, never do it for free. Well, sometimes it takes a little luck to get into the position where you can actually monetize it. But luck will find you if you stick it out long enough, I think, because it's just a game of fortune you're playing. You know, if you roll the dice enough, eventually sevens are going to come up. So a lot of times what happens, people end up failing at something because they didn't maybe stick it out long enough. And the luck never came there. It didn't meet them yet. They didn't get lucky yet. But if they stuck it out, they would have got lucky at a certain point, and they would have got to a point where they could monetize whatever type of passion they were trying to monetize. But they didn't have enough time, or they felt like they weren't getting anywhere and they kind of gave up. So, you know, luck is a huge portion of it, but sometimes you just have to stick it out. Well, another aspect too is like sometimes, you know, if you want to monetize something, in the beginning, you probably will have to do it for free. You're going to have to wade through the muck and the mud to get to the nice shine, you know, the nice green pasture on the other side, you know? And that's, I think, sometimes part of people's problems. They want to be paid right now. They want to get the money. They want to get like the reward in the beginning. And unless you're extremely lucky, that doesn't really happen. And sometimes you got to wade through the mud in order to get to that green pasture. Luck is one of those things, like, it's just that. It's luck. You never know when it's going to happen. You could be, you know, I don't know. You could be streaming for 6 months and nothing happens. Or you can be streaming for 3 years. Or you can be streaming for 2 months and then, like, you end up you have no idea. You just don't know. But the thing that gets me is, like I said, is like the right libertarians walking around with their books of Atlas Shrugged who go around saying like they're self-made. You're not self-made, bro. There's so many factors that went in to get you where you were that you had no control over. Find a job in today's economy that you're generally passionate about from the minute you hit the floor is basically impossible. Nothing wrong with, by the way, working entry level where you have to, but if you want to build a career, it takes a different mindset. You can't really climb the corporate ladder internally. Like, no, you can't. Yeah, you got to switch jobs. Yeah. That's one of the problems that has become of corporations, the corporate world in the States anyway. Yeah. You generally can't climb the internal corporate ladder. If you want some sort of raise or some sort of benefits that you're not getting at your current position, you have to change jobs. You have to leave your job and go somewhere else. And that is something that's changed over the last, I don't know, maybe generation and a half. Because like boomers and stuff, they were able to like climb their corporate ladder within their job and get raises and get proper raises and proper rewards for staying with the company and working well. Our generation, millennials, we don't give a fuck because the company doesn't give a fuck about us. So we're like, peace, I'm moving, I'm going to this company because it's better for me and it's better for my family. The company will fire you without a moment's notice. They'll lay you off. They don't give a fuck. So, and they're not going to, and in most cases, most corporations aren't really promoting within in a sound way. So if you want a pay raise, for the most part, you actually have to switch jobs in today's economy. My manager got laid off after almost a decade working at this one hotel because there was a pay dispute with a room. Jesus Christ. Yeah. You know, employee time and in corporate America and working. I have zero loyalty to a company. I'm loyal to me and my family and my friends, but the company isn't loyal to me, so why should I be loyal to them? I've been laid off before, and they're not like, oh, here's 2 weeks, you're going to be laid off in 2 weeks. But they want you to give them 2 weeks notice when you fucking leave. But they'll can your ass in a day. And I have nothing wrong with that. They're a capitalist corporation, and they they have to make decisions based on their balance sheet and profit and loss, and I understand that. Great. But then don't expect me to make some sort of moral, ethical decisions about when I'm going to tell you to leave or I'm going to leave. I'm going to again be bound to my balance sheet and my profit and loss that has to do with my family. So this is the type of relationship we have. It shouldn't be a one-sided relationship where I'm expected to do things that you're not expected to do. Let's see what more bullshit Larry's spewing over here. I could have swore I saw Dylan Burns. I could have swore I saw on Twitter that I think he's talking to Larry in the coming up. Dylan, I know, knows more about foreign policy than Destiny. I don't know how good Dylan is on history, but maybe I'll be less triggered when I see him speak to him.
If they do enact that policy.
Here is what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
Here is what I would do if I was president, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
I would put all of this stuff to Congress and say, Congress, are you prepared to declare war on China? Are you ready to send your men and women, young men and women, your children, and I have a child who's 17 years old, to send my children off to war and die for Uyghur Muslims? If the Americans go, yes, we care, we are prepared to die for Uyghur Muslims, then off we go, and I would fight that war to the best of my ability, and I would win to the best of my ability with the least amount of casualties possible, and I would devastate them and win that war. But unless that happens, no, I, as a president or as whomever, I don't get to go, well, that's bad. So all you people, send your children to die over there. And when they come back, we'll ignore them.
Well,
no,
isn't that, I don't understand.
Years.
Yeah, I don't.
And what
I agree. I mean, I agree with that. You should be taking these declarations of war to Congress like normal, like how it's supposed to be done. I mean, I agree with that completely. But yeah, it's fine to work a day job. Important not to starve, of course, but building a career takes something outside the job these days. You have to have zeroing on something you love and land a position tangentially to that somehow, and that usually takes a bit of hobbyism. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. That gets a fax if I can find it. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. The good thing about today's world is that is actually possible. You know, it's more possible for us, for our generation, to do that than it was for our parents because of the internet. You know, it's not, I'm not saying it's easy. It's definitely not easy by any means, but it's more possible for us and our generation to do that than it was for our parents simply because of the internet.
18 years old. If my commander-in-chief at that point, it was Ronald Reagan, my first commander-in-chief, if he had told me to go to China and kill Chinese people, I would have.
Good old
and
Ronald
most
Reagan.
Of the military would, and they would die and leave their legs in the streets of Beijing if need be. Why would I take that power, that strength, that loyalty, and throw it away for nothing? I'm not doing it.
I just don't understand the difference between this and invading Germany then. Why would we vote to throw our soldiers' lives away just for fighting wars?
I said no. I just gave it to you. I just gave it to you for finding the Hitler thing. I just gave you the...
I mean, before you weren't giving him it. Before you said the world would have been better off if we didn't get involved in World War II. To be fair. Is Sharpe saying he'd gladly die for... Yeah, he's saying that he's saying that I guess that we shouldn't waste that type of loyalty to country and some sort of mission. We shouldn't waste that type of devotion and loyalty of our soldiers. We shouldn't just throw them into some conflict and waste that type of loyalty and devotion, which I agree with. I think that's what he's trying to say. But I definitely wouldn't just die for Reagan. That's for sure. I wouldn't die for any. If I was in the military, I wouldn't be looking at it, you know, as I'm dying for the president or the man. You know, you're dying for the values and ideals of the country and your the land, your family, your people, the cause. All right, Mel, take it easy. Appreciate you stopping in and the sub. Thank you.
The one. I said no to that too, though. I said no to all of them. I just gave you the Hitler, because fine. If that's all we were doing, I'll deal with it. I would accept that as the only time. Fine, we'll knock the Hitler out once in a while, once a century. If this China one's one time per century, I guess, fine, we'll do one. But the problem is, that's not what we're doing. We have our fingers in every single pot. We're fighting in civil wars. How is that going to work? It hasn't worked yet. I can't think of any win. I can't think of us winning a war since 1945. Have we won any, unless you count Grenada as a war? I don't know if you count it as a war. If you count Grenada as a war, I guess we won that one if you count that.
Well, I mean, we won the Iraq war. It just you know, afterwards, we weren't able to manage the aftermath, but we won the fucking war. I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. We just couldn't manage the aftermath. We couldn't nation build. And we never, I don't know why we thought we ever could, honestly.
I guess it's a matter of perspective. I would argue the interventions in Korea, in Iraq, in Bosnia, in Kosovo.
Yeah,
these are
and
examples
Korea
of
too. Yeah, Korea.
Interventions, but I guess you're saying that in other worlds, maybe Korea turns out better because it's united, or Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, and Kuwait has a right to get destroyed, and that's their war to fight. So I guess it's not necessarily better if in your eyes.
Kuwait, and look, Kuwait is a country made up by Britain. It's a port that Britain made. Otherwise, there's no history to Kuwait. It's just the British said we want a port here, and we don't want to give it to the Saudis, so we're going to put a port here, and we're going to call it Kuwait and put some guy in charge and call him the king. That's Kuwait. So, and that wasn't even a bloody war. I mean, compared to otherwise, it wasn't even a bloody war. But my point is, do we as Americans want to send our youth to die? In the case of Kosovo and Yugoslavia, that was really an air war. I mean, we lost almost no ground troops. I think we lose 6 or 7 or something like that. We lost almost no ground troops in Yugoslavia. We had a couple of our pilots captured here or there who were shut down. But even they didn't die. They didn't die. We got them back. Yeah. So we lost almost no troops, and so that's why Yugoslavia, not bad. It basically was an air war, which is still not great. But they still have problems there. They're still fighting each other.
So with this, you keep mentioning this, that like civil wars, if they're not allowed to fight, they're still gonna have problems. Would you like support then on one side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, just one of those sides just needs to annihilate the other so that they can move forward happily into the future?
No. I can tell you what should have happened. I'm glad you brought this up.
Can we do anything? That's what Destiny's asking. Can we do anything in these civil wars? Can we support one side? Like, because during our civil war, the British, by way of not trading with the South, they essentially helped the Union. So should you completely stay out of, like, you can't do anything? You can't throw your support behind one side. You can't cut off trade. You can't continue trade. You nothing.
The reasons why, and I actually did a video on this if anybody cares. It's on my page, the Israel-Palestine conflict. One of the reasons why we're still fighting there is we never let the war end. If you look at the last time they fought, and I live in New York City, there are many Egyptians in New York City. In fact, an area near me in Queens is actually called Little Cairo. There are many Egyptians and many Jews in New York City. You ask someone who's Israeli or Jewish, who won the war of 73? Oh, every Israeli goes, Israel won. Ask any Egyptian. Egypt won. They both believe they won. That was why it took so long to get an actual peace treaty there, because they thought they thought that they had both won. The problem is we stepped in. There should not be any occupied territory. There should have been an actual peace treaty that said this area is now Israel and this area is now Palestine. That didn't happen.
Wait, hold on. People legitimately believe that Israel lost that war?
Correct. Yes. Ask some of your Egyptian friends. I don't know if you have any Egyptian friends. I have some. Ask them. They will tell you. Yeah, we won. Of course we did.
Okay.
We stopped because the Americans forced us to stop. Yes. They believed they had to stop because America told them to stop.
Bush 41 knew that Saddam was the way he was because he was holding ISIS down. Bush 43 didn't understand, apparently. Power vacuum over and over results in radicals. We had no plan and we left the vacuum, then laid off the military. Yeah, Iraq was a complete disaster. Just an absolute disaster. But like I said, I wouldn't say anyone say we lost the war. We won the war. We just completely fucked up in the aftermath of the war. And we probably were always going to fuck up in the aftermath of the war, honestly.
Otherwise, they were going to beat Israel. Yeah. Because we went in and stopped the war. So their propaganda is we were going to win, but the Americans stopped us. And they've been raised on that. So they believe it. Yeah.
We won the war and lost the next one. Yeah, we lost the ideological war and like how to actually build afterwards. Yeah. We're good at, like, it's like what we were saying before. We broke it, but we had no idea how to fix it. We were good at breaking things. Fun fact from W. Bush, still present. Every president is a war criminal. Oh yeah. Well, the war criminal notion. You get a lot of people who will just kind of. There are obviously war criminals in the States, but then you get people who just throw out that term willy nilly and call like everybody a fucking war criminal.
So my point is,
So
if we would have let that war end,
yeah,
we didn't. Again, we just every time Israel fought, we didn't let the war end.
So what if this war
Right,
ends
so-
in the annihilation of one side? If that is like the natural ending to it, is what I'm asking.
I would hope it wouldn't, and I would try to stop it, and I would try to get people to do the right thing. I would try
But
to
now
have
you say
negotiations
try,
to
but you
stop
wouldn't.
that.
How?
There's no real trying we can do. We can just shout at them because we're not going to go to war or do anything with anybody because we're not interventional.
Yeah,
so what
how?
does trying even mean?
That's correct. Yeah. Look.
So what do
who
you
makes-
do?
I'll tell you what the outcome has been. If you go prior to World War II, in the Middle East, America was looked upon as an actual honest broker. Because we didn't want to, in any way, shape, or form, conquer anything. We just wanted to get oil. That's all we cared about back then. We were looked upon as an honest broker. Now we're not. So what we have done has not worked. The Middle East is still a disaster. They're still fighting. There's wars every 10 years or whatever. There's wars in northern Israel again. It's still fighting everywhere. There's wars every 10 years in this area. What has our intervention done? Could it be worse? I mean, maybe it could be worse. But if we had just walked away, say after 73, once Israel's up and running as a nation, and we walk away. Right now, Israel and Saudi Arabia are allies. Here's the future.
the thing I can't argue against is like we have no idea if that's true. You have no idea if that's true. There's massive pressure
right.
from a multitude of countries. So it's possible that Israel isn't fine. It's possible that Israel just gets destroyed almost immediately.
You mean right now?
Yes.
You mean right now?
Yes, right now.
No, impossible.
Why? How?
Please, if you could show me any historian or any expert who would say that, I'd love to see that. They have the most powerful military
They wouldn't be destroyed right now for sure. But he said just walk away in 73. He said after 73, after that up and running, just walk away. Well, they definitely could have been destroyed then. That's for sure. Right now, no.
nuclear weapons.
Both countries we aren't at war with. And no one else there in Congress didn't approve it. Yeah. That is one area where I do completely agree with Mr. Larry Sharpe here when he said, you bring it to Congress, you get a declaration of war from Congress, and if it goes through the normal chains of how we decide things, then yeah, you go through it. That is one area I do completely agree with, and that doesn't happen anymore, and hasn't happened really since World War II.